Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for making the time to come onto our Zoom Planning Commission meeting. This is our first Zoom meeting ever. So everybody, please bear with us. We're all learning at the same time as we go through all of this. We have a packed agenda for tonight, so I am going to get started right now. Just for the sake of the public that is on our call, if you see it here, you should be able to see the agenda screen. We are going to briefly talk. Well, for an hour and a half, we're actually just going to be talking about our Unified Development Ordinance and specifically answering some questions that the Planning Commissioners have and that staff has for Planning Commission. During this part of the meeting, there won't be any opportunity for public comment. It'll just be us speaking. Then at 4:30 p.m., we will then dive into our study session. We have two developments that are presenting to the Planning Commission tonight for informal feedback. Those are Tommy's Quality Car Wash and then Lakeshore Habitat for Humanity and Jubilee Ministries, their site plan and rezoning. So they will be on at about from 4:50 p.m. to 5:30 p.m. And then after that, we'll jump into our regular meeting. At that point, there is opportunity for communication from the audience here at this agenda item with a 5-minute limit. And then we'll jump into our unfinished business, which is for the development at 317 Central. Now, everybody is welcome to either stay on the call for that entire duration, of course, or you're more than welcome to, get off of the call and come back once your agenda item is, that you're interested in is up. Likewise, if you're just interested in learning about the UDO, where we're at with the UDO, and then you don't want to be on for the rest of it, of course, you're more than welcome to hop off as well. We will keep you muted, and really we recommend to everybody that if you're not speaking, to mute yourselves so that there's not any of that background noise to interfere with the meeting. So Chris Corey from McKenna Associates is here. Hi, Chris.
Hi, everyone.
And what I'm hoping we can do quickly is, Chris, is just kind of bring Planning Commission up to date with what our process has been in the last couple of weeks with staff and with the consult with you and your team. And then jump in head first to all of our questions for Planning Commission.
Sure, thanks, Jenna. Briefly, as Planning Commission knows, we did have a full draft of the UDO ready about 6 weeks back, which was presented to staff. And since then, more or less, we basically been going article by article. I know that Jenna, Mark, Tricia, Dan, some others have been involved in some internal meetings. They've provided comments to McKenna. McKenna has made some changes, sent them back. During that period, we've also received some comments from some planning commissioners, which we appreciate. Appreciate you all looking through it. And from that process, we've come up with a list of questions, which Jenna is going to go through with everybody over the next hour and a half. Hopefully we can have some good discussion and come up with some clear direction on each of these. Our review process back and forth with staff is projected to last for several more weeks, and we'll probably have more questions for Planning Commission as that goes. And once that's wrapped up, then we will be headed into our final public engagement push and then into the adoption process.
Thanks, Chris.
Great, thank you. So moving on to our questions that we have for you, which we've provided for you in your Planning Commission packet. Hopefully you've had an opportunity to look through them. The first question, several of these questions come from Fred. Thank you, Fred. As well as from Lynn. And Andrew has put forth some information towards these questions as well. I do want to mention that we do want to stop a little bit before 4:30. I'd say probably, let's say, like, I don't know, 4:15ish, to see if any planning commissioners have any other additional questions or concerns or comments, to at least just write them down for future meeting. Once we get, through this or wherever we end up stopping, we'll then know whether or not we should have another Zoom meeting for our UDO meeting for the month, which would fall on May 26th, I believe it is. Okay?
Yeah, Memorial Day is that Monday. Yep.
Right. Okay, so one of the new ordinance requirements that we've talked about, that staff has talked about with Chris, is putting in a minimum of a certain square footage for apartment units. And so really what these would be studio apartments, like the micro units that you may have heard about. They're going up pretty much, nationwide, as an alternative to larger studios or larger apartments. Currently in our zoning ordinance, we do not have a minimum square footage size. So basically what that means is that if a developer today wanted to come in and request or have a proposal for, for 100 apartments at 250 square feet, let's say, as long as it meets building code and, of course, the enforcement of the like how many people can be in a room or in an apartment is enforced, they could do that without issue. The planning commission staff can't do anything about it. So what we're suggesting here is, or what staff is recommending, is to put in a minimum that we're all comfortable with. We've vetted this with Dan Tiley, as well as Trisha Dreyer, and it's very comparable to what other cities are doing, which is provided in your background information per Andrew as well. So thank you, Andrew, for that information. So in doing so, we want to make sure that people aren't coming in for 250 square foot apartments if we're not interested in that. And B, we want to highlight the fact that, hey, Holland, the city of Holland is doing micro units. Right now, it's not in our ordinance at all. So those were our thought processes. Fred, I know you had a concern about that, and so I'm going to turn it over to you to kind of give what your input is about that. You also saw that you received a memo from Hari and Nick today. Hari Khan and Nick Rolinski, for you to consider as well. We don't want to get into the details of that memo. We really want to focus right now on Fred's concern, whatever that may be. But certainly, if Planning Commission so desires, we can circle back around at a later date to go through more of those details that were provided. So Fred.
Okay, so in reviewing the UDO, like all of us did, I came upon this section about housing, and we've been discussing affordable housing on the Planning Commission for some time in lots of different ways. It seems to come up every time somebody proposes an apartment building, and some folks look to see if there's anything that's barely, below $600 a month or whatever the standard is for affordable housing. And we never really have much of an answer. The issues come before City Council a couple of times about whether they wanted to support offering some kind of financial vouchers or some kind of a system that would assist people to get affordable housing in our community. We've run into lots of stories of people who can't afford to live here and who've moved and gone to Grand Rapids instead of living here. And the issue has been swirling around the Planning Commission for some time without us facing it head on with some kind of an attempt to help develop a housing strategy or whatever. And so I am somewhat interested in a minimum standard for the city of Holland in our UDO. I don't know what that standard is. I mean, there's always some trade-off, or it seems to be a trade-off between making apartments smaller and decreasing the livability of those apartments. And I'm concerned about the decreasing the livability of apartments. So, I mean, that's one option on how to make more affordable units is to make them small enough so that people can afford them. And I'm not sure what you're left with in trying to live in a unit like that. And I think that we as a planning commission, or we as a community, need to strike some kind of balance between affordable housing and the cost of an apartment and the size of an apartment. Because if we simply want to make small enough units that people will live in, then I'm not sure how happy or what the health of those people will be living in places that are just so cheap and have so few amenities that we created a nightmare for people. And so because this issue is so complex, I would like to explore it at greater length rather than trying to establish a minimum size currently in our UDO. I think it's a great topic, one that we certainly is a big topic in Holland, and we should approach it in a kind of give it its due as a complex and difficult subject, and not simply go with a minimum standard without discussing a lot of the other nuances. While waiting for this to start, I had printed out that memo that Harry and Nick Berlinski had written and looked really quickly through there, and I can see they're talking about several of these issues as well. And so I'm in favor of exploring this issue, but I think we need to figure out a way of striking a balance between the cost of a unit and the size of a unit before we approve something. And so those are my only concerns.
Fred, what did you mean by amenities?
Well, so if you, it's an interesting topic, but it's one that I have experienced myself over and over again, having lived in so many different cities. If you live in, let's just use the downtown as an example. The downtown area is what I call amenity rich. You can walk out of your apartment in the downtown and there's so many things in your environment that you can approach on foot. It makes the smallness of your apartment less difficult because you're able to take advantage of so many other things.
So external to your living quarters.
External to your living. There are some amenities. I lived in an apartment once that had really high ceilings and had really small footprint. It had really high ceilings and gigantic windows. And those windows and ceiling made up for the fact that it was so small, because somehow it gave me psychological room to breathe and made it more pleasant to be in there. So there's some amenities that are inside an apartment, and there's more. Usually I'm talking about amenity rich. I'm talking what's within striking distance on foot around the apartment. So I think the worst situation would be to be in a tiny apartment way out on 16th Street next to 196 and be living out there without a car. I mean, that would be a really miserable situation for most people. And so that's another way of looking at it. Maybe the idea of striking the balance would be to have smaller units within certain zones, within certain zoning codes, so that you could have a better livability standard along with a smaller unit. I don't know. I mean, I'm not a housing expert, and I've read a lot about it recently coming to Holland, and so I just have a lot of thoughts, but that's about as far as it goes right now.
It makes me think of the walking score, but instead of being an amenity score, So if
Yeah.
there was some sort of way to score it and keep track of a certain area of Holland, I don't know if that's even possible. But
Yeah.
if there was a certain area that was zoned that had a, you know, a 10 out of 10, then you could build a smaller unit there.
Yeah, something like
yeah.
that. Some way to include that in with a smaller unit. I mean, I think some of our downtown zones are that way. Maybe the TRN area is that way because it's relatively close to downtown, and it has a neighborhood that seems to be rich with parks and you know, things to do outside of your house. So yeah, that's sort of what I was thinking about.
It's Jennifer, could I ask a question of Jenna related to, like, we do have a housing expert in Ryan Kilpatrick. Has he weighed in on this size, and does he say that's reasonable or that's standard to most cities, or how did that formula come to be?
Who's that question to?
Jenna.
Jenna, you're muted. There you go.
Okay, so first of all, the formula that we originally had in the 200 plus 200, we've actually since nixed that. We've realized that that's too complicated. Really, bottom line, where we're at right now, staff and Chris, is at 300 square feet as the minimum unit size, and that consideration is first of all taken by looking at the building code. And so basically taking, you know, that you need to have a kitchen, you need to have a bathroom in a dwelling unit. That's the definition of a dwelling unit, as well as living space. So taking the building code, which we figured out would pretty much get us to about 220 square feet, and then saying, you know, make it a little bit bigger for livability's sake. This is also very much in line with the micro units that are in places like Detroit right now, and really nationwide. So in response to your question about Ryan, absolutely, we have talked to him about it, and he's very much for it. While he also, you know, is concerned about amenities, and staff is as well, we feel our position is really that we're not forcing anybody to live in these small micro units. There may be someone who wants to live close to the expressway and wants to live in a small unit. We don't feel like we want to, we don't feel that it's our place to regulate that. We just want to provide a minimum standard in case a market study is done that finds that there's a market for these units. Now, what Planning Commission can weigh in on, and certainly should, is the amenities, the amount of open space and things like that, which we're already baking into our zoning ordinance. So those developments would already need to have a certain amount of landscaping. They would already need to have open space and things of that sort. So potentially, you know, we also say that the complexes, and I wouldn't say just for micro units, I would say for any apartment complex, would need some type of other amenities, a playground, a barbecue area, you know, whatever those might be, that is under our purview. Whereas the rest is, well, if they want to live there, and if the developer can build it and feels that it's a feasible project, then why not let them build it?
Yeah, I think it's interesting that we didn't have a minimum standard. We don't have a minimum standard now, and nobody's building small micro apartments. But I think it feels like the reason that we're talking about it now is because there's a market for them. And there are people who are interested in living in apartments that are small. So I was wondering, Jenna, and I think you've answered my question, was to why we needed to include a minimum standard. If that was, I mean, why would we need to do that? But I see that it's a good idea, I think, to come up with something that we can all agree on would be, minimally livable and I know it's hard sometimes to think about where, like, I don't know that I would want to live in a small apartment like that, but I certainly know people who would. So I think it's valuable to and I don't know if we need to make this decision today, but certainly I would like to see us come up with a minimum standard of at least 300.
Yes, Fred?
So that it kind of begs the question about standards, about what is a minimum size that is also livable. And so you guys are floating the idea of a 300 square foot apartment. As I was saying, this Michigan, I think I got this from Brian Kilpatrick's, one of his documents, the Michigan State Housing Development Authority has 450 square feet as a minimum standard for a studio apartment. And then as you add on bedrooms, it gets to 625 or 850 or 1,000 square feet. Up to a three bedroom is 1,000 square feet. And so they are an entity, I believe, that has some clout in Michigan and has studied the issue quite a bit. And I don't even know if this is an old standard or a new standard, but there are a lot of standards around. I think Andrew pointed out a couple of them. There's Holland Charter Township maybe has a standard of 550, Grand Rapids 357. It's something that I think if we want to explore into looking at a minimum standard, then I think we should explore it and look at the trade-offs and the costs, and before we decide on what we're going to do, if we're going to have a minimum standard.
Okay.
That's my.
So perhaps we can get a consensus from planning commissioners if, I mean, it's not a vote. We can definitely come back regardless and talk about this more. But I guess if we can just kind of get a consensus right now as to where everyone lands so that we know how to prepare for that.
So just raise hands and say if we want to have a minimum standard.
Yeah, if you want to have a minimum standard, or if you just want to leave it how it is right now with no minimum standard, or if you want to talk further to potentially increase the minimum standard.
I think having a minimum standard would be good.
Yeah, I'm in favor of a low minimum standard. And if we could look at what Hari and Nick sent over too, I think coming back to this topic would be good, but I feel like we're all about the same place.
I would say the building code is currently the minimum standard, correct?
Correct.
And so we would want to increase that a bit, but not overdo it.
Right.
Okay, so then I guess we'll bring it back to you for additional information.
Good.
Sounds good.
Good.
Okay, thank you. So moving on. This is another question that came from Fred that staff were intrigued about, actually. So currently, when there's an administrative site plan review, we notice it out to 300 feet radius buffer from each side of the site for residents to say whether or not they feel that it should be bumped up to planning commission for review. So as it's written right now, the ordinance just simply says that it can be bumped up, or that, any resident can request it, and then we just do it. I can tell you, since I've been here, which hasn't been that long compared to Mark, and Mark weigh in also, but since I've been here, we have had a couple of people that have been interested in it going to planning commission, though after just having a conversation with them, they understand better, and or we've been able to work out details among the resident and the developer themselves, or the construction workers. So it's really not a huge issue, but the question is whether or not these requests should just be open-ended as they are now by the residents to push it up to planning commission, or if there should be more basis of a criteria for what would push it up to planning commission, and if there's a possibility that just a portion of the plan would be reviewed by a planning commission rather than the entire site plan, as it were. So, Fred, do you want to
Sure.
add to that at all?
We're living with one of these right now. I mean, we're entertaining the appeal of the infill ruling that was an administrative ruling. And if you remember, we had approved the project and everything about the project, and then a local citizen decided to appeal the infill ruling, whether it was suitable or not and it met the infill standards. And so that, now that the initial appeal came in simply that they wanted to appeal, and that's the way our ordinance is written. All they have to do is say, I want to appeal, and everything stops. And the citizen appeals the administrative review. So I thought, well, I think that the chances are somebody may want to appeal something that's not even part of the infill review, but they still want to use that lever to say they want to appeal something just by slowing things down and getting their chance to appeal something that isn't appealable from that perspective. And so I thought that we should include that there needs to be a reason for that appeal. And that it seemed to me that since we've seen now that there are criteria that are used that the planning staff uses in determining whether whether the infill is appropriate or not. Perhaps we could put into the language that anybody can appeal, and when they appeal, they have to choose one of the 6 criteria, so one or more of the criteria that are already established. And that way it would narrow down our discussion when it finally came to the appeal. A person wouldn't be appealing every aspect of a development that they're not entitled to appeal, but they would be sort of focusing in on one of or more of the 6 criteria that are being used by staff to determine infill appropriateness. So that was, as you say, it's a small matter. And so it just occurred to me as we were experiencing this, going through it, that it might be a good idea to do it that way.
Mark?
Yeah. So Fred, I would wholly agree with what you're stating there. But I think that what this number 2 is getting at is slightly different. So what number 2 is getting at is when we do notice out a standard administrative site plan approval, included in that notice is the opportunity for somebody to say that they want to have a full-blown public hearing at the Planning Commission. Okay, so this is getting at just kind of kicking it upstairs from the staff level to the Planning Commission. It's not really an appeal per se, like you're going to be looking at later on in the regular meetings. So I would agree with Jenna. I think that the way that this noticing works now, we've only had a few of these occur over the years, and leaving it in place where an admin review can be kind of pushed up to the Planning Commission level and have a full-blown public hearing and stuff like that. Personally, I still like the ability for citizens to be able to do that, but I fully agree with you, and I think it's a slightly different matter.
Yeah, it looks like it's a different matter.
To appeal an administrative decision that's already been done, like for an infill review, I think that there should be some requirement in the ordinance that makes them list the rationale for that, and that it shouldn't just be, well, we want to appeal it just because.
Because we don't like it. Yeah.
Yeah.
This one just says that if somebody is saying, my neighbor's doing an addition, I got noticed, it's going to the Planning Commission, but I want a public hearing.
Yeah,
That's what this is
So
asking.
it would be going to an administrative review where there wouldn't be a public hearing.
Yeah.
So they're saying, I want there to be a public
Right.
hearing with
Okay.
Planning Commission to review it. So it's
Okay.
it's not an appeal because no decision has been actually made.
So my point isn't about this matter. My point is about something else.
But when staff
Good
and
point.
when we talked about it at the staff level, we thought that there was good insight into there that maybe just the issue that that the resident has could go to planning commission, but the rest of the plan could be administratively reviewed and approved.
Yeah.
Which we thought made sense because then it saves time for planning commission to look at the whole package.
So with regard to a regular administrative site plan, not an infill design review, would the action by the resident happen after the administrative site plan review? Because right now there's the two processes are slightly different, right? For administrative site plan review, please correct me if it's wrong. For administrative site plan review, the notice goes out that it's going to happen. And then before it actually happens is when the residents have the opportunity to kick it to the planning commission instead. So at that point, there hasn't been a review, and there may not even, the site plan may not even be available, or maybe it is. But at least in that scenario, it seems harder to me for someone to know what their specific issue is, right?
Yeah.
Whereas with infill design, it's that the infill design review has already happened and can then be appealed to the planning commission. Is that correct?
That's
Right. So taking away the infill design element, because that's not really what we're talking about right at this moment. But talking about the first bit, yes, they would have access already to the site plan, and there would be a reason as to why they would want to kick it up to planning commission. There always is, right? Like, there's not enough landscaping in between my property and the development property. So they know what reason there is that they want to kick it up to planning commission. So I guess the thought would be that prior to the admin review, or during the admin review, they would still let us know, just like they always would. But instead of just saying, hey, we want the whole site plan to go up to planning commission, they would say, hey, my issue is blah, 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 blah. And if we can't resolve that issue on an administrative level, then that issue itself would then be kicked up to planning commission.
Okay, that makes sense to me.
It seems like there would be, like I'm sort of on the fence about that, because it seems like there would be, it would almost feel a little bit more complicated to separate them, and that it would be hard to review one little component of a site plan without the entire picture. And I can imagine where the conversation would broadly cover the site plan as we start talking about one little component.
That's true. That is a possibility.
So it seems like it makes, well, yes, and I suppose that we could talk about every eventuality, right? But it seems like it might be, it seems cleaner for people to be able to say administrative review or planning commission.
That's a good point.
There may be a slight middle ground where the city requires them to write out what their problem with it is, so at least it focuses the planning commission, whether that's formally saying, okay, everything else is still administrative review or not. That's really just a matter of how we write it in the UDO and how it gets administered. But I think there's some value in requiring people to say, this is my specific concern or concerns, just to avoid the issue of doing it just to hassle the neighbor.
Right.
Good.
That's a good point. Is everyone in agreement with that? What
Yeah.
Chris just said?
It could be even like a multiple choice where it's like, all right, do you have a problem with setbacks or windows or none of the above or all the above? I don't know if that would make it easier for you or not, but
I think it would just be easier for them to just write
make a comment. Yeah.
and you could provide it in your packet.
Sorry, I'm homeschooling, so it's all multiple choice right now. So.
So my point that I raised was simply about the infill review. It wasn't about the rest of this.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize that. That's.
Yeah, mine was only about the infill review, because we make it so easy for someone to want an appeal of the infill review. All they have to do is write a letter without stating any reasons. And then, we add another month onto somebody's project without even knowing if what they're wanting to appeal is appealable or not. That's why I think it's, that's why I wanted to add just this one thing. And once I saw how Mark's write up about how he uses these criteria to determine infill appropriateness, then I thought, well, they could just use that same criteria to object to something. You know, it would be because that criteria is quite comprehensive. So that's where
Oh, that sounds good. Yeah.
Yeah, so Jenna or Chris, if we don't have anything in there to on appeals for infill, we need to.
Okay. I have some language
Good.
addressing Fred's concern that you guys can review
Perfect.
actually pretty soon, because it's going to be in the next article I send you.
All right.
So I'll highlight it so you can make sure you review it.
Great.
But
Okay. Oh, sorry.
no, I was just going to include that. I know Fred mentioned that was just for the info review, but I agreed. I think when there's an appeal or a challenge, that we should have at least a rationale at the beginning. Because for the info review, we got a lot of great information, but it was after and we weren't able to prepare. So if we ask that information up front, kind of what is the piece that they don't like, potentially that can help you in, you know, the administrative review make the decision, or, you know, because it could get to a neighbor saying, I don't want to tell you, I just wanted to go to planning commission, and get stuck on their heels, and it gets pushed up. And like I said, just to Fred's point, it could delay the whole process when it's just, I don't want them to chop down my tree that I've really enjoyed for years.
Yeah.
So I really think that's why there should be some standard, or at least a rationale to initiate the conversation, to know, you know, how we can steer it one way or another, or if it needs to go to the planning commission, great, but at least having the opportunity to know, you know,
Mhm.
at the concern.
Absolutely. So we have noted that. Chris will put it into Article 9 and Article 12, right? Okay, so moving on. Irrigation. So this question is actually from me. Mark and I have talked about it. Chris and I have talked about it as well. So we get a lot of pushback right now from developers right now on landscaping. Surprise, surprise. So one of the issues that they seem to say quite frequently is, well, we don't have irrigation, so we can't plant the landscape requirements because all of our trees will die. So my pushback is, and I understand why we don't require irrigation. It is quite expensive, and certainly some companies would be able to afford it, others wouldn't. Some companies don't even have water on their site. For instance, there's a barn, toy barn is what it's called. They don't even have water on site. So so I understand why we can't full out, you know, why maybe it's not a good idea to full out require irrigation. But I did want to pass by you, you know, possibly language that would say that they need to demonstrate a maintenance plan to keep the landscape alive and thriving, which could include irrigation depending on the design and species. But that other acceptable designs could be xeriscape, rain gardens, green infrastructure, etc. Right now, we don't, in our existing ordinance, we don't require that. We just say, hey, this is our landscape standards. So that would be a change, and we just wanted to get your feedback about that.
From a park perspective, I like the fact that you added that language in there, because irrigation is tough. There's a lot to it, and it can be really complicated and cumbersome for somebody to do and expensive. But they have all sorts of plants that they can pick that don't require a lot of water, that are perennials, not annuals. You can put gator bags on your trees, and it takes very minimal amounts of water to keep a tree alive over the long term. So I don't know, I like it. I think that language is good.
Great. Is there anything else you would add to it?
No, I think that's good. having a plan, picking the right species of plants and design, all that's good. And it makes them kind of think about it a little bit more instead of just plunking plants down that won't survive or aren't good for the location or the exposure or whatever it might be.
Great.
Andy, is it your office that reviews landscaping plans from developers?
Yeah, we look at it when they get tossed our way. Absolutely. And Jenna and I've talked about tree species and different things and types that work and don't work.
Yeah. Well, I certainly like the ad. I mean, it makes a lot of sense to combine the two, and especially if the person who's doing the reviewing is reasonable. You know, it doesn't go crazy with underground sprinkling networks and things like that. So, but yeah, I like the idea in general.
Yeah, I like the idea as well. I like giving them the option to be creative with this, and you know, if there's a way for them to be able to do great landscaping without need of irrigation, all the better.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Great. Any other comments on that? Okay. So moving on, Andrew has, so currently proposed in our form-based code where we've set front setbacks in the form-based code, north downtown, east downtown, and centennial areas to have a minimum setback of 5 feet, but in central downtown, a minimum setback of 0 feet. So Andrew's question is, can we change that NDT, EDT, and CENT, north downtown, east downtown, centennial, to have that 0 foot setback in the front, similar, well, exactly the same as CDT 16th Street in the form-based code in the Washington Avenue form-based code district as well. I talked to Dan about this again today, and he said that he sees the benefits and negatives of doing that. That was initially where we had landed. You know, he really stressed the desire to have more landscaping in certain areas, which a 0 foot setback would not really allow, other than in planters, boxes, and things of that sort. He was talking about the different context areas, you know, in terms of what is existing, while he acknowledged that Park Theater, for instance, has a 0 foot setback. Looking up at, you know, at Maxwell Lofts and Centoani, you know, they have a bit of a setback. That street needs to be completely reconfigured, but in general, the setback that remains kind of works. Though he also sees, you know, that there is the potential that people would want that. The one concern for EDT that I know that we talked about while we came up with these was the pace of the traffic there. So just coming into downtown, you know, it's still pretty fast and a lot of traffic. And whether or not that setback then should be back more. So Andrew, if you want to comment more on that, and then we can discuss.
Yeah, I'll jump in. Since I sent along this comment, I did take a map out there and look more at the areas. And I am willing to be wrong on this one. I think 5 feet can make sense. I think the reliable sport lot is the only lot I have a problem with. I think it'd be nice if that could have a 0 foot setback to align with the Park Theater. But like you mentioned, Centoani, Maxwell Lofts, they're about a 5 foot setback. And I think that can make sense.
I have a question about this. Does that mean the building, or if the building has like 5, 10 stairs, is it the stairs or the building?
The setbacks measured from the building.
Yeah, it's measured from, I should have gone right to the page and looked at it, but it's measured from a load bearing element of the building. So not a
Okay.
porch or stairs, but a column, yes. but for the most part, the foundation, the wall.
So if people wanted to build at the 0-foot setback, the staircase or whatever they would use, if their building was set up higher, the staircase would be interior.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so you could have the staircase come all the way to the sidewalk,
Mhm.
and then, but then the main wall of the building would have to be at that 5-foot minimum.
Right now, yeah.
Yeah, based on what we wrote.
And maximum would be 10 feet.
Mhm.
And maximum is measured to the, or you can have elements of the building behind the maximum so long as your forwardmost is in front of the maximum, if that makes sense.
And is it the back of the sidewalk where you start measuring, or the curb? Where do you?
The right of way line. So that's, probably the sidewalk, maybe 1 foot inside the sidewalk.
Mhm.
In some cases, probably somewhere wacky, but for the most part, yeah, the sidewalk. It's not from the curb. That's for sure.
Okay.
So when we look at these neighborhoods, though, these are for the most part, these are older traditional areas. Buildings are older.
Mhm.
We have some newer parts of downtown now that they're built right to the curb, right to the line, right? But some of these have some really old staircases that are exterior to the building. So the building is set back and it does have landscaping.
Mhm.
Yeah.
City Hall is an
Mhm.
example of that. Yeah, I think that one of the things that hasn't been articulated that was part of the reasoning here is that some of these areas, Centennial, North Downtown, East Downtown, I guess Jenna mentioned this in East Downtown, but I think it applies to the other two, is that there's some heavy traffic roads.
Mhm.
And by having a 5 to 10 foot additional setback, not 50, like 5 to 10, you basically are widening the sidewalk. Not literally. Maybe that area is landscaped or something. Maybe it's not actually walking space, but it's space that makes the pedestrian feel less constrained without completely, blowing up that outdoor room feel. That was the idea behind the 5.
What's our current setback for the central downtown area?
0 to 6.
Okay, 0 to 6. Okay.
Which is existing now for
Yeah.
C3.
And Andrew, are you withdrawing your point or not?
I would say mostly. I think the reliable sport lot is the outlier here.
Okay.
But I think 5 is small enough that it still gives us the urban feel we're looking for.
Yeah, me too.
So I wonder if we could say, Chris, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Lynn.
Just for reference, the building, the residential building on the corner of 6th and Central, what's the setback there? Does anybody know that offhand?
6th and Central.
Like XL Lofts or?
No, the one that
No.
the one faces the corner, the big 3 or 4 story.
The condos?
Yes,
Terraces?
the terraces.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's probably set back. So
That's
I know
got
the garage is there. That's probably set back 25 or 30 feet, Lynn.
Uh-huh.
So to the building, I think the building right on the corner there, I think that's a little closer than the garage. It's like, I'd guess 20, 25 foot setback.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was, it just helps for reference, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Chris, I wonder if there's a possibility, Chris and Mark, that that we could add something like planning commission may require it to be a lesser setback if adjacent to, a building that already has a lesser setback.
What about I think that's a possibility. The other suggestion I would have is that the Park Theater block could potentially become CDT, right? I know that it actually does face
Straight
Centennial
across the
Park,
street.
but yeah, true. But it's got a different character than everything else that faces Centennial Park because it has the Park Theater on it, which has no setback and is more like a downtown building as opposed to the more monumental and slightly set back buildings or the residential that's nearby.
I think it changes the landscaping of the building a little bit though, when it has sort of an inset doorway. And so you don't have just the facade of just the building on the sidewalk. So the Park Theater is unique in the fact that, it does have a doorway that's right there, doesn't it? Go in a little bit or no?
It's got a little overhang, doesn't it? If I can remember correctly.
It does have an overhang, yeah.
Some of that may be over the right of way, actually. But
Yeah, I think so, because it's right, it's flush with the building. With the
that
side.
does change. Sorry, that does change the feel.
The sidewalk is also very wide there.
Yeah.
Jana, you mentioned that Dan is opposed to this. Did you have any explanations for Dan?
Yeah, so like I said in the beginning, I talked to Dan and he further expressed that he sees both sides. I mean, on one hand, he sees that there's that concern about buildings being at the corner and being an issue with clear vision, sight corner, whatever, which you heard before but that was really looking at the central downtown area, and that's not even what we're proposing to change. So he's less anti this as originally thought.
Okay.
But we could definitely play around with some language, Chris and Mark, maybe, and see what might make sense. I mean, even maybe in the Centennial Zone District, if we were to say on 9th Street, or I'm sorry, on River Street, River Avenue, the setback would be 0 feet. You're muted, but I'm assuming that you're saying.
Yeah, 0 to 10, right? We wouldn't require 0, but we would
Right.
allow 0.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then that would then, in turn resolve the reliable sport property issue.
My only hesitation is that River's busy and it's fast.
Mhm.
So unless the sidewalk is a good 6 to 10 feet wide, which it is in some places, like by City Hall, it's going to feel very cramped.
The only area that this would pertain to, right, Chris, is just from the reliable sport to 10th Street, right?
Well, if we said River Avenue, then it would pertain all the way down to the library, but that's City Hall and the library.
Right.
So
the
chances of someone
library-
building something there, even in the next 50 years, are unlikely, right? City Hall and the library are probably not going to go anywhere.
I would also disagree that section of River is fast heading south, because it's right after a light, and it's only one lane. So it actually is a section of the road that isn't, to me, is not as fast as say some of the farther south.
The 2 lanes, though, going north, I feel like I'm taking my life into my own hands sometimes. Crossing
we're
there.
talking about the other side of the street, right? We're talking about the other side of the street.
True, but the general feel of the whole road, not just one lane. Yeah, just me.
Yes, but when you're at the Park Theater, you don't feel like you're in danger. In other words, it is on the other side
True.
that it seems
Yeah.
faster.
I think your concern is legitimate, Brooke, but I think that in this particular case, it is on the west side. It's not as threatening.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also going to be a light at 12th Street.
Oh yeah.
What?
Yeah.
No.
Those Oz people, the wizard.
Don't have to
is
try to
bringing us
stop all the
alive.
traffic.
Well, the Oz thing only contributed to it, but this has been a conversation with city hallers for years. I mean, we talk about, taking our lives into our own hands, trying to go for a walk during lunch to the park,
Mm-hmm.
Okay, folks, I think we got to move
Okay.
around. We got like 20 minutes and we got to get through a number of them yet.
Yes. Okay, so number 5, Lake Macatawa easement and street extension waiver. This was brought to our attention by Lynn and Fred. Fred, if you don't mind me giving it to Lynn, is that okay?
I don't mind, no.
So Lynn, if you want to talk to that.
Yeah, I would welcome having a broader conversation about this, although I feel like we did have a conversation about an easement on Lake Macatawa, and that it was clear I think it was unanimous around the table that we wanted to make sure that there was secured public access to Lake Macatawa. So
Absolutely.
this was a surprise.
Yeah, I think Nathan is in on that discussion also. I think in fact, we had a very explicit discussion about this, and we looked at both sides, and we decided that it's now or never to hold the line on something like this, and we wanted to hold the line, and it took a lot of political will to push this all the way through, and we decided we were going to go that way. And so I think that's where we still stand.
So specifically, it says that the provisions of this section may be waived through a PUD agreement, provided that other means of public access, both to the waterfront and across the site, are established and constructed on the PUD site. So specifically, what language there would you want changed? A, would you want a waiver at all to be available?
No, I think
No.
that's the discussion we had.
It is absolutely the discussion we had, because I remember somebody drawing on the board what it could look like if we could walk around the building and this and that and the other thing. We all just, after that discussion said, nope, we just want.
Even Haryi was there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
the conversation
Did
was
we
definitely
learn
we wanted.
nothing from both worlds?
Yeah, we wanted people to be able to have access to the waterfront in a continuous line all the way through, all the way around.
Continuous line, right.
Okay.
Okay, so Chris, we'll take that out.
Yes. I think there was an instruction related to this previously to also prohibit the Board of Appeals from granting variances from this section. And I'm on board with that, but I think it needs to be run by Ron.
Okay.
But I'm certainly, I have no objection to removing the PUD part.
Okay.
In fact, I just did.
So it'd be a PUD or a waiver, right, Chris? So right now you're allowed to get a waiver from like the form-based code.
Yeah, it says you can't do that either.
Okay.
So the current draft language, which is actually, it was the sentence before this thing about PUD, says no waiver under section 3.14 or variance under Article 12 shall be granted to waive or vary the provisions of this section. And then it was going to go into this thing about PUDs, which I just cut.
Okay. I think that's
I
it.
can just quick comment here. So, I mean, you all know how I kind of feel about this. I'm just, if you want to totally do away with it, that's completely fine. I'm just a little concerned that we're completely painting ourselves into a corner. And if something does develop, that that the developer says, well, we need to have this, or it's a done deal, then we're completely painting ourselves into a corner. There's no waiver requirement. There's no wiggle room whatsoever for planning commission or city council to accommodate something then. So I think that that's not a position that I would recommend being in. I think that there needs to be a little bit of wiggle room, but this is certainly planning commission's bailiwick here. So
Is that purely because of developers, or is that because of the type of land that is there?
Well, I think it's partly because the way the ordinance is worded too, because it basically says the entire frontage along the water has to be treated this way. So we're stating every square foot on the water has to be a part
Public
of
access.
the easement area, and there's no ability to say, hey, 95% of it is good, or if you want to have this easement kind of come in from the corners a little bit, or for whatever rationale, we're really, you're saying there's no ability to make any kind of adjustments for whatever design thing may come down the pike. So I'm just a little bit of afraid that we're painting ourselves into a corner. I guess that's all I want to say.
I disagree with you a little bit there, Mark. I think that this still does allow for some creativity on the part of the developers, but what we're saying is we want a continuous, the way I envision it is a continuous walking or biking path all the way along the waterfront, and that there is some wiggle room with the developer in terms of how they create that access along that line. I remember pulling up a Google Maps view of Toronto
Yeah.
and showing the waterfront in Toronto. I remember being in Hawaii that, in Hawaii, there was public access all along the beach. Every single place that you went, it was different in front of the different resorts.
Yeah.
You could walk from one place to the other, and you couldn't be prevented from doing that. And I think that's the kind of thing that we're looking for here.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree with the mayor, but I
feel free. That's why you're here, Mark.
Yeah, I know, but it's just my impression. The way that the actual language is crafted is it says that this easement area it's required to be along the waterfront. So while the actual path itself may be able to bob and weave a little bit, I mean the easement has to encompass the entire waterfront area for the property. So
yeah, and I don't disagree with you. I don't disagree with you on that at all, Mark, but I think that we did have some discussion as well about whether we were going to prescribe how that easement had to be designed. And I think we backed away from that, as I recall. We looked at some specific design ideas and said, well, no, we're not necessarily going to hold a developer to having it absolutely have to be the first 10 feet from the waterfront.
Yeah.
And that it had to be paved or those things. But we said that it had to be a continuous easement along the water.
Yeah, I think creating the development for the community has been our goal this whole time, and saving that space for them and not catering necessarily to the developer who does have wiggle room and they are able to use as much of the footprint that's buildable as they want to for whatever creativity they want to do for the building.
Mm-hmm. I think we all see it as an opportunity that we have, that it is very unusual to have this opportunity, and it's something that would make Holland very special, and also something that really responds to the whole public process that we had about all of this. And so I'm completely in favor of doing this and taking the chance, Mark, that we're not doing something bad here. But I think everybody recognizes this would be quite a special thing.
No, don't get me wrong. I don't think that what any of this is bad.
No.
I just fear that we'll be in a situation where we might have to be looking at a text amendment to allow us some wiggle room. But hopefully, I am wrong, so we can move on.
Good.
Any other comments about that one? Okay, so on the same topic, really, looking at the Lake Makatawa easement agreement requirements, we wanted to just pass this by you not last time, but another time, I should say, just to make sure that we're getting it right. So specifically, we wanted to look at C and D of this. I believe that's correct. Is that right, Mark?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. So basically we're looking at, okay, so you have this pathway and this easement on the waterfront's edge. It's in close proximity to development. Do we treat that pathway or easement, I should say, as a kind of public park, whereby public parks have a open time and a closed time, or do we treat it by just kind of laying out that that you can't that the developer can restrict the use of the easement for certain reasons, for camping, so that people cannot camp, fish, picnic, playing of sports, and setting up chairs and other temporary furniture. Now, we say that one possibility, right, is to put up gates at night, though we see that might be an issue in the morning. Oops, I forgot to put down the gate. So we're trying to just get those details in there. So specifically, we wanted to pass C and D by you again.
So my take on this is that this area would be similar to the walkway along Holland Park, right?
So Holland Park is, right, so.
So
they-
there's no hours on that one, and there's no gate.
No, there is hours. There's public park hours. Andy, do you know what those hours
Yeah,
are?
well, Collins a little weird. So Collin Park, technically what we've done now is allowed people to pass from point A to point B through it. And if they're doing that, that's permitted at any time of day. If they're
Or night.
yep. And if they're going to stop and fish, they have to get a permit, which is free. It just allows them to be there and allows them to fish there without getting a ticket, or they can't loiter there just to hang out there. They can't be on the swing set at Collin Park in the middle of the night, but if they're traveling from A to B or they're fishing, that's permitted.
That sounds good to me, because we don't know what kind of development is going to be along this walkway, and there could be housing above, correct? In any one of these buildings that's there. So when you talk about people's privacy and their living quarters being possibly right there, sounds like those are appropriate restrictions to me.
Yeah, I kind of see it as just as the sidewalk, really.
Mm-hmm.
So you would be able to walk past any of the buildings downtown at any time of night. And if you're making noise or if you're setting up a table, none of that would be permitted. I mean, a certain level of noise. So I think I certainly wouldn't want to see a gate, and I would not want to see hours either. It's not a park.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with that also.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely a cross between like not the Heinz walkway, actually, not at all, because there's businesses right there. So it's more of like a downtown sidewalk, but it's just on the water.
I'm curious what Andy might think about, since you live and breathe all these things. Can you see anything going on with that, Andy?
Yeah, I would agree with Lynn. Like, I think we have to kind of look at it as like a sidewalk, and that's what we did with Collin Park. Was we took the park out of it, and it just happens to be a sidewalk is adjacent to the park, and so yeah, you're going to run into issues with people fishing. You're going to have people wanting to set up like camp chairs along the sidewalk to watch fireworks or just hang out or do whatever. And do we want to restrict that? Because those are temporary seating things, so yeah. And it hasn't been as big of a deal as what we thought. Like, we were doom and gloom when we first did it. Like, oh man, we're going to get 1,000 people that want to fish here. Well, we've got like 4. So it's not like that's that big of a deal. Yeah, issues that come up that we'll have to talk about and kind of work through as we go, and it maybe need to get tweaked from time to time, and that's okay too.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it's notable that, sorry, that the way this is worded is it requires allows the easement language to prevent this stuff. So it wouldn't be the city; it would be the option of the developer or landlord or homeowners association or whatever to include that easement language and then enforce it, right? Rather than being a city rule. And it also might be different on a parcel to parcel basis going up the waterfront, depending on the use and the preference, which I suppose, there's downsides to that too, but that helps with if someone is cool with people fishing, then they're cool with people fishing and they can say that, but the next property owner doesn't have to be.
Enforcement of that's going to be really tricky.
That's tricky though. I didn't think of it that way.
Well, I mean, I guess it comes down to, and this would probably be in this easement language as well, or we could put in this guidance in the UDO, we could have something saying, the city, it is not going to be the city's responsibility to enforce these easement restrictions. You can include them, but it's going to be the property owners, so I don't know, but that's going down a little different path. That's not really zoning, I suppose.
Chris, would it be smart to look at it from the other perspective in terms of what's the bare minimum that the easement has to provide? In other words, it has to allow for, ingress, egress, the passing through there, and then we leave it up to the individual property owners to put whatever other restrictions that they want to on it. But what we're saying is you have to provide this level of use for the general public over this easement property.
Sure.
So
I mean, we may be able to bring it all the way down to, you know, A and G, right? So A, which says, you know, the easement must allow free passage of public on foot or non-motorized vehicles, and the free passage of emergency vehicles continuously from one side to the other. And then G, which is you can't put down a gate.
Mhm.
The rest of them are permissive, right? And I think they're almost included as a way to show they are about policy, they are about regulation, they are about a future development, but they're also a way of, as we do this now, of showing the development community, look, we're not trying to make you do these things. We are, you know, these things this would be from the perspective of these activities by members of the general public, this would be private property and you could restrict those things. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, if we just don't say that, then, you know, they'd still be allowed to do that in their private agreement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just want to make sure that I don't want to be contradicting ourselves by saying, well, we're allowing free passage to the public on foot or non-motorized vehicles, and then a developer goes, you know, I think I can keep the amount of traffic down if I allow camping on the easement as well, because then I know those early morning runners aren't going to want to have to, you know, skirt around the tents that are on the easement also.
No, that's a good point. I hadn't thought of it that way at all, to tell you the truth.
I aspire to be an early morning runner. I'm hoping that at some point I'm running along this easement
Yeah.
in the pre-dawn hours.
Yeah, and bikers also. I mean, I think
Yeah.
it'd be a great place to fly along. So, yeah.
So
I
maybe
guess-
restrict camping.
Camping in the definition of setting up chairs.
Temporary chairs.
And again, I don't even know if we need to get to that level of detail, because I know that along the Collin Park Boardwalk, people are setting up chairs, you know, almost every day, but they're doing it in a way where you can still pass by. I run through little groups of fishermen all the time. And we just kind of respect each other's space. They've got their stuff set up and they're able to fish, and we're able to walk or bike or run around them.
And they have enough space to be able to do that too.
Right.
And there's there are built-in benches in some of the areas, and there's a brick wall in some areas where they can actually sit and not even have to set up a chair.
Right.
And there's language, right, Mark, somewhere that, you know, you can't just plop a tent on on a sidewalk,
Mm-hmm.
right?
I don't know that for a fact, Jenna.
You can't camp in a public city-owned park,
Right.
No, you can't.
right?
Right.
I don't think that you can camp.
Not overnight, but maybe somebody would want to put up a sunshade tent, right? Like during the daytime, things like that.
Hammocks.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm for keeping it simple. I'm keeping it as Chris suggested, you know, maybe A and G.
A, B, and G.
I'd affirm that.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. I wouldn't want to be walking along and be doing something wrong in one 10-foot stretch and something right in another 20-foot stretch. That just doesn't seem like a good idea.
So are we keeping B about restricting the use of other motor vehicles?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So you have to allow, so the way that is worded then is an individual property owner could make it open to motor vehicles. Of course, in order to do that, it'd have to be part of sort of their road network, right? But not every property would have to do that. It's not a roadway along the river, it's a walkway.
Right, but they could use it as their emergency access lane, right? As long as they were to construct it to be 26 feet wide and 75,000 pound bearing.
Yeah. Yep.
Are we potentially getting into a problem where a property owner uses that as an entrance to their facility, and there's so much vehicle traffic that it becomes inconvenient or dangerous for the foot and bicycle traffic?
Should we say it must restrict the use of motor vehicles except for emergency vehicles?
Yes.
That's
Yes.
what
Yeah,
I
I
think
like,
we
I
should
prefer
do.
that, I think.
Yes.
Does this mean as well that we would not allow them to be able to put their outdoor seating in the walkway?
We
would
did
not
just,
allow.
like, so that was one of the
That was F.
permissive things, right?
Right.
They could do that. There's nothing saying they can't. They just can't erect any permanent barrier to block public access.
So yeah.
Well,
with
and
A,
any outdoor seating would have to meet the outdoor seating requirements to show you have to have at least 5 feet of clear space. So
Mhm.
that's not great, but it's something.
Mhm.
Yeah, and we've got that free passage of the public on foot or non-motorized vehicles. That I would hope would supersede the placement of the seating.
I'm just worried about bike lanes,
Mhm.
right? Okay. As long as we have bike and pedestrian space.
Mhm.
Okay, so we're at 4:15. So I think what we'll do right now, we do have really just 2 more questions. The number 9, we've had some further talk among staff, and we're actually thinking just to keep it as is at this point, the DDA process. But we can circle back to that if anyone's interested at a different time. The CMU overlay, which was, if you recall, retrofitting shopping malls. We want to talk to you more about that. We still think that there's a good benefit to it, but we do agree that we really need to outreach to the shopping center owners before we really write any ordinance language. So our proposal would be to come back actually after Udo and have that as a project and try to, gain interest that way. So that's just kind of, I would assume that you're all in agreement with that, because it didn't sound as though any of you were gung-ho about the retrofitting, the mandatory retrofitting of shopping mall strips. Anyone object to us coming back to it after Udo is passed?
No.
Okay.
Sounds good to me.
Was that?
Sounds good to me.
Okay, great.
Mhm.
So then really that leaves us with the private street issue, which we do definitely want to get some feedback about, and the RRROD again, which Fred had brought up again. So my proposal, if everyone's okay with that, would be to push that off to our Udo meeting at the end of the month. And at this point, let any other planning commissioners bring anything else that they might be concerned about in the next 10 or so minutes.
I have a question, if I may, concerning the process. I was listening carefully about where we are in the whole Udo process and when we're going to come to an end and have a draft that is used then for public hearings and public opinion. And I think we've talked about what is the public process going to be. We've heard various things over the course of doing this whole thing, and I think that the Planning Commission should be asked and should discuss what the process for public opinion should be before we launch it. I mean, I think we need to talk about what kind of thing we expect out of that, and how we can avoid pitfalls and problems with it. And just we need to have a thorough discussion about what we want to have happen after we get to a draft that everybody agrees to.
Great.
And I don't mean that we need to do that now, but I just want to be, I want to put on notice. I think we need to have a very explicit discussion, because there's going to be options about how to handle the public opinion, public input process. And And I think we have to go into that with our eyes wide open, and we need to decide that ourselves what we want.
Definitely. And that's something for sure that we could talk about at the end of the month. Also, given the light of COVID, and how that affects public outreach going forward. So we would love your input on how best to do that. I know there's ways like microsites and getting feedback. I know that Holland Township's working on their master plan with Chris, and what they're doing. Obviously, we definitely want a big outreach effort, but we also have to take into consideration that we can't have what we used to be able to have. Everyone come, so we would love your suggestions, and we could definitely have that conversation at the end of the month Udo meeting.
Okay, good.
Lynn?
I had an additional question. On page 5, I think it was, I don't know if that's the electronic version or the hard copy. Chris defined the transect, which was a nice little drawing about how density gets greater as you get closer to the business area. And I wonder, I don't remember us ever really getting. And I might have been in a flu state at that time, but I don't remember actually having a final discussion about whether or not we were going to allow for more density in RTRN. And especially as I looked at that little drawing, it seems like we would actually be encouraging more density in that area closer to downtown.
I think I thought the final takeaway from the RTRN density discussions was to basically keep the same rules that we have now.
Yeah,
the 4,800 square feet.
And I don't remember. I apologize, Chris. I don't remember exactly. So maybe I'm just revisiting this to make sure that we're on the same page. But if we kept it the same, I was just wondering if we wanted to encourage more density in that area closer to downtown.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think it's if there's planning commissioners that want to discuss that further, I think we can. I think you guys can all see the transect diagram that Lynn was referring to that we are proposing to put right up front in the Udo, and that the RTRN district is under T4.
Yeah.
And I think it is notable that it's under T4 and not T5.
Yeah.
I think that the RTRN district is denser than R1 or R2, because of the smaller lots and the houses that are closer together and the allowances for a couple additional units. But it's not as dense as in R5. It's a T5 because you simply aren't going to be able to fit as many units without changing the character. I think that's where we came down, but I'm certainly open to more discussion on that.
Does anyone else have any more thoughts on that?
Well, I think when we looked at the options of trying to increase density in the RTRN, and almost everything we tried to think about was rejected for one reason or another. Is that true or not? I mean, we were looking at different kind of housing types, different allowing different ways to densify that area, and we eventually gave up on it, or didn't we? Or did we?
I remember that fairly similarly.
Do you?
Yes. My recollection was that if we didn't have in the ordinance now the 4,800 square foot rule that does allow for up to 4 units, provided there's sufficient space and there's rules, and if that wasn't already there, I feel like we would have come up with something like that.
Yeah.
But there wasn't. It felt like there wasn't a lot of appetite to go beyond what we already have.
Yeah. In fact, there was a lot of pushback in the public meetings. I mean, at least half of the people in the public meetings were saying, we've got enough here already, densify some other place. And then there were a group of people that were liking that kind of density. They liked that kind of environment, having more people out on the street and so forth. But there definitely were a group of people that were saying, we've had enough of this.
Yeah.
And so that's what kind of tamped our enthusiasm down for making more density in that area.
There were, but if you recall the survey results also had shown that there was interest.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I mean, I remember people actually being encouraging more density in the
survey.
But
It really depended on the person and the venue. I think
Yeah.
we had a few people that pushed back against what's currently in the ordinance.
yeah.
But then we had people who were saying, yeah, let them build. So
Mhm.
I think that
We could
one thing
read-
we do have going for us is, by creating some of these, the new form-based code districts and allowing more residential in what is now C1, in what is now C2, in areas that are currently zoned industrial that we're going to switch over to RMU. I mean, that's the same neighborhood, right? But they're areas with busier streets or businesses or something. And so the density is, in this draft of the UDO, is the increased density is clustered in those places, as well as some new stuff you can do in R1 and R2 that you couldn't do before. So that's where it's at.
Okay.
So does anyone have any appetite other than Lynn, I guess? I guess that's, kind of what you wanted. Is that the question, Lynn?
Yeah, I appreciate the input, and I'm good if everybody else is good with that.
So everybody else is good with where that landed?
I think so.
Not
Yeah. Well, we have a lot of opportunity to increase density in the form-based code areas and in the R1. So a lot of good can be done there. TRN is kind of tapped out. There is maybe a little we could do there, but that's not where we're going to see the gains we're looking for.
Agreed.
Great. Thank you.
okay. Does anyone else have any questions in the next minute? Okay, so
Shall we do a break though? Or no? Or get up as you need to?
you can, yeah, you guys could do a quick break. I was going to just go over the rest of the agenda real quick, but you can do a quick break.
If we want to, Jenna, that might work well because then I'll let
Right.
the members in for the study session. So they can join while everyone's taking a break.
Okay, great.
Sounds good. Get a drink, get some coffee. You gotta stay awake for a little bit.
Yep. Thanks, everyone. I'll be signing off. See you in 2 weeks.
Thanks, Chris. Bye.
Bye.
Oh,
Chris.
yeah, you can change your background, huh?
My background? You're muted. If you're
Nathan had changed his background to a nice windmill.
Oh, I love it.
Awesome.
Um,
Anything from over here?
Hey everyone, we'll be getting started in just a couple of minutes. We took a little bit of a break, so as soon as I see more of planning commission in chat, we'll get started. If you can please mute yourself intermittently until you're going to speak. If you're going to speak, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you. Okay, Brooke, when you're ready, we can begin the study session. Looks like we're all back on.
Yeah, we can get started.
Great. So hello to those of you that have just joined us. We're now on to our study session. The first topic is Tommy's Quality Car Wash. We should have some applicants on here. Are you on here, applicants?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
Mandy Brower's here.
Great.
Ryan Essenberg here.
And Megan Weidman.
Great. Welcome. So quickly, I'm just going to give a real quick overview. And then I also do have the video up here for you all to discuss with Planning Commission. I'll turn it on, of course, for their benefit, though they were provided those links in their packets as well. So the property in question is this large area down in the southern portion of the city, just south of 48th Street along M40. It was zoned as PUD a long while ago in the early 2000s with the thought of having the like south area. What was it called again, Mark? Sorry, South
Point Center.
It's South Point Center, but there was the whole plan for the south area, like a south neighborhood that would be more walkable and mixed use.
So you're referring to the South End Master Plan?
South End Master Plan, thank you. So that never actually got any legs, and we've been seeing, Planning Commission has seen quite a bit of requests to turn that property, the PUD and PRD zone property, over to industrial and commercial in recent years. So now we come upon this really great proposal for Tommy's Car Wash headquarters, and you can see in this map that they show that these properties in question are not the Residence Inn, which it currently exists, and not the property just south at the point of South Point Center, but the properties A through G. So with no further ado, I'm going to forward it on or pass it on to the applicant to discuss. And then you can do a quick presentation and then get feedback. Let me know, do you want me to be on the site plan or would you like me to show the video?
Commissioners, my name is Steve Whitty from Netterveld, here today representing QCW Enterprises LLC. They're also Tommy's Express. Jen, I think the screen you have there will work for now. And this is a very kind of crude preliminary drawing of the concept. And then we do have a 3D model that probably shows it or does show it a lot cleaner to make it make a little more sense. So I had a little bit of trouble logging in, so I missed the first couple minutes of the meeting, but a little bit of background on Tommy's Express, and they can elaborate on this too. They're a local company that have been around for many, many years, but they have a wide number of locations throughout West Michigan. And then they've been looking for quite some time on a location where they can build and locate their corporate office to kind of consolidate their operations. The Tommy's Express part of it is a national franchise. So they have car washes that are franchises across the country that they bring people in for training. So this facility would accommodate that as well. So this is kind of a central location for them. So then that being said, what's proposed for the site is their corporate office. The building itself, for the corporate building, will be about 223,000 square foot in size. The office part of it will be on the north end of the property, and then parking will be to the west, and then loading docks will be to the south. A portion of the covered parking area to the west will actually, we're looking at doing covered parking with solar panels on it to be more green. So if you look hard enough at the plan, you'll see kind of the solid lines around some of the parking areas. Those would actually be covered. The other part of the project is they are planning on doing a small car wash facility for Tommy's Express at the southwest corner of the site. So if you look, you can see that. It's what they call the world model. So it's smaller than the other Tommy's that you'll see across West Michigan or at Rivertown Mall if you've been there. So that's really the bulk of what they're proposing now. They are also purchasing the vacant property that's north of, I think it's called South Point Ridge Drive. So north of what you see on the screen there. They don't have any plans for that. They don't know what that'll be, but they will own that. And then when they do move forward with any type of a development there, they'll obviously come back to the Planning Commission for that. In talking to staff, as Jenna probably already did say, to get this development to move forward, we need to rezone it from a PUD to an industrial or an I-1 use. So that's kind of what we're looking for feedback-wise from the Planning Commission. Again, Tommy's view on this is we want to be a very attractive site. There's a lot of outdoor seating, patio areas that we're trying to incorporate, which shows up on the 3D model. So with that being said, I don't know, Jenna, if you can get to the 3D model. I think it's like a video. So you can kind of see hopefully you can follow what's going on when you watch the video. You can watch it again if you want. That right there is the office part of it. And then an outdoor patio area on the north end. And then they do have some storage area along Waverly, which is what you're seeing on the left-hand part of the screen. That's also set up for a possible future building addition. That right here. And that'll be screened in. And then on the south end, like I said, you saw the truck docks, but now it's panning the other way here for a second. So an outdoor area again at the northeast corner of the building. Truck dock loading area on the south end of the site with some truck parking. And then in the corner, you can see the car wash building itself. That's a relatively small building. It's like, I think 1,700 square foot in size. And they like that there because it's obviously right along M40. And then also, like I said, they bring people, their franchisees from across the country to the facility too. So then the people can look at that facility too and see how it functions and that type of stuff too. So that gives you a little bit of an overview on the project, and any feedback or comments or initial concerns that any of the Planning Commission has. We'd really like to hear that now. Our plans are actually to submit, if we get somewhat of a warm fuzzy, so to speak, our plan is to submit for the rezone and for preliminary site plan already next Tuesday. Next Tuesday, and then we'd be in front of you officially in June. So that being said, that hopefully gives you an overview. If you have any questions on the Tommy's Express side of it, one of the people from Tommy's, I'm sure, are on this meeting too, and they can tell you a little bit more about that. If you have any questions on the layout, anything like that, I'd be more than happy to answer those types of questions. And thank you again.
Thank you.
Planning commissioners, do you have any comments, feedback?
I do. I think it's awesome. At first glance, I think the building's pretty cool. It's a great spot. Love the solar panels. How, just out of curiosity, this might be in the weeds a little bit, but how big is that car wash compared to like what's at Chicago Drive and 120th Street?
The Chicago Drive and 120th, that's a little bit atypical because that has a restaurant in it too. So that's, and a gas station. So That I don't know right offhand how large that is. Their normal model that like is at Rivertown Crossing Mall is about 5,000 square foot in size. This is about 1,700 square foot in size, so it's quite a bit smaller. They call it the world model, so they're kind of trying to move to this a smaller operation.
I just asked because I'm thinking, why go small? I mean, I think that would be, I mean, not that the building doesn't have all the amenities like a restaurant or a gas station. I understand that. That's totally, it's going to, I bet from my own opinion, that's going to be super busy and super popular.
Sure.
This is Ryan here. I can talk a little bit on that, but the typical model is 130 feet long in terms of the car wash lengths, like you see at the Quality Car Wash on Chicago Drive and most of our locations. And what we're really trying to do here is not necessarily just a car wash for Holland, but it's a model of what's really the most popular kind of car wash around the world. And the rest of our facilities in West Michigan are a little bit larger compared to what most people can either afford to build or find the land to build. So when we go into Southern California or in Europe, this is a little bit more of the model. We want to make this a show place for that design that's a little bit more universal as a smaller investment level and smaller property requirement. So big cities and rural areas, we can build more of these models.
And it actually, if you look at the site plan, it actually fits in pretty nicely with the land we have available at that corner, because the drive entrance off M40 is already there. And I'm guessing MDOT won't let us change that. Even if the city were okay with that, MDOT probably wouldn't. So it actually fits into that corner fairly nicely. If the building got any longer than normal size, it would really be an extremely tight fit there.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, I think industrial zoning here makes sense. Feeling warm and fuzzy about it.
I really like the layout of where the parking and then where the doors for the semi truck and trailers are, as far as, you know, they're kind of tucked in the middle on the south end of the building. Then you've got some outdoor seating in there, I'm assuming for employees and for lunchtime for anybody there that's visiting or working.
Correct.
I'd like to echo what Andy said. I think it's a great site. It's pretty interesting looking buildings. The car washes around town generate a tremendous amount of traffic, and in some cases, if they haven't worked it out right, it causes quite a bit of congestion along the arterials that are supporting it. So I'm sure you probably have something in mind to handle that kind of traffic, and especially queuing. Some of the car washes that we've seen, I think you were talking at Chicago Drive, Waverly, there's quite a queuing that takes place there just to accommodate the demand. And so that needs to be taken into account when you're designing the land around the car wash.
I'll comment on that a little bit too. We do have a plan for, you know, the 4 existing Quality Car Wash stores and how our future looks to sort of balance that out. So part of managing that is by building more locations like this. And it's kind of that hub and spoke concept of where members can wash here and will somewhat relieve those peak days. And so that's kind of also part of the plan. And we do have some plans with our north side redevelopment and future plans to kind of balance that out a little better. And these are the types of things we'll use as tools to help with that, I think is a positive.
Okay.
Yeah, one thing, talking specifics here that I didn't mention, that you had just mentioned about the architecture of the building. One thing I didn't mention, the northern part, that kind of bulb, which is an office, the shape of that, they're actually trying to get the same symmetry or the same shape as the arches of their car wash. So they're even trying to tie that architecture together with their corporate image and logos. I found that interesting, so.
I just want to echo what other folks have said as well. I love the idea of the solar panels. That this area has been really looking for some sort of development. I think the design is great. The use of the property is great. And I'm relatively new to Planning Commission. I don't know how often we get applications with a full SketchUp that we can kind of fly around with, but boy, is that helpful to be able to see really what this is going to look like.
It's a lot nicer than my black and white plan.
It is. I appreciate it. I definitely do.
So I just quickly want to chirp into, so as Jenna indicated, I mean, it's currently zoned PUD. As we do the staff write-up for this, we'll delve a little bit into kind of the historical background with this to kind of satisfy potentially your curiosity. But, you know, this was the South Point Center original development out of the mid to late 1990s. A great local developer by the name of Cal Prinz had great visions for this area here. Quite simply, it didn't take off. Okay, the marketplace didn't react to it, and much of the retail and kind of other development went to the north side of town, and this just kind of has been languishing here, so to say. So we have, as Jenna indicated, we have been having some tire kickers over the years, wanting to say, well, hey, city, would you change that PUD and allow, you know, some industrial stuff? And for a while we said, no, we're really married to this PUD. But, you know, 4 or 5 years ago, we did change the PUD, and it did allow for some industrial uses to go on this site along Waverly Road, the west side of Waverly. But nobody moved forward with that, you know. So nobody really kind of wanted to do the piecemeal approach to doing some development here. So when we learned that the Essenbergs were interested in the site, it's like, wow, what an opportunity. What a great family in business, and to welcome into this really kind of a great piece of dirt. It's a great part of the south entrance right into town, the south gateway, and to have this located right there in a prominent position is just a great opportunity. So you will have to go through a number of things, kind of, you know, nullifying the PUD and doing kind of that stuff. But yeah, suffice it to say, staff is really kind of is excited about this, and looking forward to working with the Essenbergs on this project.
Absolutely.
Looks good.
Okay. So it looks like you're good to go for.
All right, and like I said, our plan is to submit everything for the rezone and the preliminary site plan set next Tuesday. So hopefully we'll maybe see you in person next month, but maybe not. Who knows?
Mm-hmm. Well, thanks for coming on here.
Yeah, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Okay, so moving on. Get out of that one.
I never thought we'd be doing planning commission stuff on the computer. I just have to say.
Indeed, it's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is.
Just confirming, this is study session, right?
Correct.
Correct.
You can talk, Dave. It's okay.
Oh, no, I'm going to mute myself.
Oh.
So I'm just going to interject quickly again, just to introduce our next presentation. We have Lakeshore Habitat for Humanity and Jubilee Ministries on the call. I see Don. I don't on my screen see Steve, but I'm sure he's there.
I'm here.
Yep, I see Steve. And is Gail here?
Yes, I am, Jenna.
And Todd?
He is planning to join. I would expect him to show up anytime.
Okay, great. So I'm going to turn it over to them real quickly. Again, they'll present and get some feedback from planning commissioners. But I just wanted to give just that quick rundown real quick. This is the property, the city-owned property at 285 West 36th Street. If you recall, there was a review of by City Council, where they determined that this property was to be considered surplus property, which initiated a planning commission approving the request for proposal and the requests going out being disseminated. We obtained several proposals in response to that request for proposals. After council looked at all of them and based on staff's recommendation, they decided to go forward with Lakeshore Habitat for Humanity and Jubilee Ministries. You may recall that at that time they were, we had been referring to them as Third Coast Ministry, or I'm sorry, Third Coast. I don't believe that is anymore their name, but the applicant, yeah, Gail's shaking his head no. So the applicant is Lakeshore Habitat for Humanity and Jubilee Ministries. They did have they are required 2 public outreach processes or workshops. They had one back in January at Herrick Library, and I'll let the applicants speak to that a bit. We have included some information about what they plan to do for additional outreach. And the one correction to the site plan is that the rezoning request is actually from R1 to PRD, which is the planned residential development. The reasoning for that is so that they're able to do their proposed house elevations. And then in the future, since we're eliminating the PUD zone district, with the UDO, we could rezone them to PRD, and that's the way that we'll have to work around that at this point. But it doesn't significantly change the request at all. So with no further ado, I'm going to turn it over to whomever wants to speak to the plan, and just let me know if you want me to show anything else that you've provided.
Okay. Thank you, Jenna. So this is Gail Mast with Lakeshore Habitat, and I'll take you through some of the highlights of our proposal. As Jenna mentioned, this really started with the property that was owned by the city at the west side of 36th Street there. And since then, we've expanded this project to really be a 2-phase development. On the north side, really the top half of that green space that you can see there, that's the property owned by the city. On the south half, that is property that is currently owned by Dick Darby, and we're negotiating a buy-sell agreement with him where we can purchase that as well, contingent on city approval of this project. So our intent is to get the entire project rezoned, as Jenna mentioned, but then we would actually build it out in 2 phases, starting with the north half and then moving to the south half, most likely a year later. And the way it's laid out is the top row of homes there. There's 9 homes in a row there. Those would all be built by Lakeshore Habitat. Then if you go a little bit farther south, you can see some townhomes. Those are 2 or 3 unit townhomes that would actually be put in by Jubilee Ministries. And we've developed kind of a pocket neighborhood concept. You can see a lot of green space in between there. The parking would be in the back of the unit, so way on the north side along the road, and then the south side of that as well, with the fronts of the buildings facing the green space. And then you can see as you go down to the bottom half of the layout as well, very similar layout, a few more units there. Again, we've got 9 row of Habitat single family homes, and then we've got 14 townhomes along the bottom. So for a total of 32 units when you add them all up between the 2 phases. The Habitat homes are about 1,500 square foot each, 2 stories, 750 on each story, with an attached 2-stall garage, and then a small porch on the front, again facing the green space. And and Steve, if you want to maybe talk a little bit about the townhomes that Jubilee Ministries is going to put in there.
Sure. The townhomes will be all 3-bedroom, 2-bath townhomes, 2-story, about 1,500 square foot also. And in your packet, you saw some renderings. The nice thing about these is we have a lot of leeway in what terms of what we can do in terms of the aesthetics of the house. You know, our plan is to do a modular. So they basically come in boxes and then we can dress them up any way that really fits the neighborhood best. So we can go more with a more modern look, a more traditional look, but we haven't decided exactly what we're going to do. Certainly would be. What was that? It would certainly be compatible with the home's habitat also.
Okay. Any specific questions on the homes themselves? Might be a good time to answer that as we're looking at the pictures there on the screen.
I was wondering if you had considered having townhouses throughout. In other words, instead of single family homes that are separated by about 15 feet of open space between them, whether you would consider grouping them into townhouses, and it would save you more land to work with. There's also, of course, the energy benefits and things like that coming from townhouses. And I'm not sure what the market is for that, but it just seems like it's an opportunity.
Yeah, we really were looking at somewhat of a, like a mixed income and a little more diversity there. And again, based on the fact that, some of these will be built by Habitat. I mean, our model is typically single family homes. We can get volunteers to help build those. So we tend to stay away from, say, a modular home where we, wouldn't have the ability to have volunteers help out in a situation like that.
I have a question. When you, I'm not exactly certain how to word this, but how do you ensure that the quality of your construction remains consistent over the course of your 2-year phase? So you have a plan for this first year. The first. This is a question actually from some of the community, from a community member. Mm-hmm. You've got your first phase. You make you get a plan. We approve the site plan, and maybe Jenna can jump in here too. How do we ensure that consistency is the same over the next phase?
Well, we would actually be the builder. It would be our house plan for both phases as Habitat, and then Jubilee would certainly be doing the same thing with their townhomes. So, there wouldn't be a lot of change from one phase to the next.
Okay.
And so also there's the possibility of, if you're obtaining a engineered site plan for one phase, and just having a concept plan for the other phase, and then they would come back with another engineered site plan for the second phase when that were to occur.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I had a quick question as well. So I'm kind of looking at the site plan. From here, it appears obviously that Habitat for Humanity will have garages. The townhouses will not have any covered parking in the correct. It's just looking like it's going to be parking spots to the south of the northern development, correct?
So the townhomes will each have a 1-stall garage plus a parking spot. So those boxes that you see right below the townhomes, those are single stall garages that each townhome gets 1 stall.
So the parking, these carports, are they carports or garages?
The plan right now is for single stall garages, similar to what they did at Washington School.
Okay. So those are enclosed garages. They are actually for the for the townhomes rather than for the single family homes, which would have a garage already encased in the home.
So do the single family homes have 2-stall garages?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Steve and Gail, I don't remember what I know that your initial plan was, it wasn't set in stone. But I'm trying to remember what the number was of units that you were intending. Does this, and it's hard to tell because you've now added another section. So I'm not, a whole other section. So I'm not sure, but it seems like is there more than you anticipated?
In phase one, it's pretty much what we've been talking about the whole time,
Okay.
which is the city-owned property. When we were talking originally, we had hoped to build between 20 and 30 units, and I think we've got 19 on there now.
Okay.
So we're actually a little under,
Okay.
but there's no way we were going to get 20 units or much more than that on that site. So.
Yeah, that's helpful the way you put that, Jenna, because it was hard for me to tell which was which. So now I see. Yeah, 19 is actually the number that I remember, Steve.
Okay.
So in total, both phases have 42 units, 42 homes?
32.
32.
Here it says 42. Are you taking out 10?
Yeah, I counted 42 also.
I count 42.
Sorry, 42, you're correct.
Oh, okay.
What's 10 houses here then, right?
Yeah.
So in your plan for parking, do you think that you have enough spaces for the demand that you're going to have, as well as visitors and things like that?
Yeah, we believe we do. If you count it up, each home has at least 2 parking spots, plus there's a number of overflow spots around the development, both on the street and in the little parking spots, the little parking spaces there.
And if you blow it up a little bit, Jenna, you can see the way along the top row, some parallel parking.
Okay.
Yep.
Is there a formula that you use for something like that? I mean, I've lived in complexes like this where pretty soon there's quite a demand for any available parking, and any visitor that comes, it's quite a trick to find a parking place because everyone has visitors and everybody has cars. Unfortunately, I mean, the car ownership now in Ottawa County is over 2 cars per household on average. And so you're probably going to fill up all the available units, but then when it comes to visitors and things like that, have you done some calculations to make sure that that's going to be accommodated?
I don't think we've done a formal calculation based on any standard formula, no.
I think you might want to look at that. I mean, it's just offhand, it seems like it's small. It's going to be constrained. There are. I was looking at the data about Ottawa County households, and there's actually 24% of households in Ottawa County have 3 cars, and so it looks like you're assuming 2 car spaces for every unit.
It looks like the homes though have space for 4 cars.
Yeah, if I could just interject, if you just take the 9 homes across the top there,
yeah,
there'll be 2 spaces at the home for each car, or each home will have 2 spaces.
Yeah.
And then there's there's more than an extra space for each unit just across the top. So it's a little hard to see, but there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think there's 12 spaces across the top. So that would give us 18. That'd give us 30 spaces just for the homes there.
Well, where do you expect people who are visiting to park?
In the spaces across the top behind the home.
Also, I mean, is that the same area that you're talking about? So you have for each household, and then you have spaces across the top. And is that also where you're expecting visitors to park, in the spaces across the top?
Yes, that would, so you'd have 2 cars at each house and then 12 extra spaces for visitors to park in. And I hear what you're saying, houses have gone to, 3 or 4 cars per household, but typically our Habitat homeowner has 1 to 2 cars.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Our Jubilee homeowner has, 1 or 2 cars also.
Well, and the average length of a car is 15 feet, and it looks like you have 16 feet reserved in each driveway.
So you have 2 cars in the garage and 2 cars parked in front of the garage if you need to.
You could potentially.
That's interesting. It appears the Habitat houses are larger and single family, and the Jubilee houses are townhouses, which I have a question in the back of my mind, but so be it.
What's your question, Dave?
Well, no, I mean, the Habitat houses are larger and than the Jubilee houses, which is usually the opposite of what's been happening historically.
No, Steve, you said that the townhouses would be close to about 1,500 square feet as well, correct?
Yeah, they're in that ballpark. So they'll be similar size. Remember, Dave, we don't have the garages attached to our buildings. Chunk of what you're seeing on the Habitat is the garage. But, you know, we're finding that, you know, our buyer doesn't necessarily want a lot of extra space. And so, you know, we just think that, and we think this modular townhouse with what we're doing on Maple and the feedback we've gotten on that is a missing part of the market. It's not for everybody for sure though.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
The ones on Maple look great.
Yeah. I was wondering, so obviously we've had some conversation about green space, and this is, I really love the way you've incorporated green space. I also am sort of partial to the grid anyway, so it looks neat to me, and I like that. So I was wondering what you're anticipating. You know, we've I don't know if you've seen this, but up on 16th Street, there's a space where they clear cut the trees, and they're gonna probably put a house there, but it just looks horrifying. They've knocked down every single tree in the whole lot, and so I wonder like how you're incorporating the existing trees and all of that into your plan. Like how, I know you've got the 35 feet around the edge, and that's terrific. So I'm just wondering about the interior and how you're gonna plan for that. Are you planning on just cutting all the trees down and starting over, or are you thinking about keeping some of those trees there?
It'd pretty much be grass is what we were thinking. You know, we looked at some pocket neighborhoods, some comparable ones that we kind of modeled this after. Actually, a really high-end neighborhood down in South Bend, and they've just got a beautiful, you know, lush lawn in between to really open it up, and it's just a shared green space. Then, like you said, Lynn, we would keep that buffer along the west side and the north side with existing trees.
Speaking of shared space, then, is this condo and their lawns are taken care of by the association?
Yes.
Yes.
Are these all on slab?
Pardon?
Are these all on slab?
The Habitat homes, we typically do a 4-foot crawl space.
Okay.
Provide extra storage down there, put the utilities down below.
And with Jubilee, we would like to do a basement, but we're not exactly sure with the water table here that we could do that. We may have to go on slab there, but if we can do it with the water table and match the elevation of the Habitat homes, then we would do a basement.
Okay, thank you.
I have a couple more questions. One is dealing with the circulation plan in phase 1, where when you come in off 36th Street, everyone is turning right. It's a one-way street that loops around, and it almost looks like a ring road of sorts. And that road along the east and western side is about 16 feet wide, as you have it shown here. So it's going to be a one-way street, 16 feet wide. A typical car lane is about 11 or 12 feet wide. So you're going
Jenna has something to say there.
I'm sorry, Fred, to interject, but we've since spoke with our administrative team for review, And one of the comments that our fire marshal has made is that that road will actually have to be at least 20 feet width. So that will be changed.
Okay.
You next see it.
Okay, good. That was going to be my point. I had imagined one car, one truck stopping the flow of everything. And so, and I, given what we're experiencing in all of our neighborhoods these days, there's as many Amazon trucks and DHL trucks coming through our neighborhood as we have residents with cars. And so there's going to be a lot of traffic along there as well. So,
right.
My other question is right now, the 36th Street itself. I mean, I think there's kind of a challenge here about 36th Street. 36th Street is servicing partly office buildings and then also 10 homes. And when this opens up, if this is still going to be the only access point into this project, you're going to be loading on the traffic and all the ancillary traffic that comes with 42 units onto a street that's currently experiencing the traffic of 10 houses. And I'm just wondering if it's an unimproved street. There's no sidewalks, there's no curb and gutter. And I'm just wondering, does the city have plans to improve 36th Street so it becomes a normal operating street, like a collector street or something like that?
It has an answer for you.
Mark, do you want to talk about? Yep. Go ahead.
Yes, so Fred, we have acknowledged that 36th Street is kind of a subpar right now. If this development moves forward, the city is committed to, after post-construction, we would certainly go back in and repave the road for sure, potentially widen it out a little bit. I don't know. I mean, we'd have to look at the engineering of that. We would for sure be putting sidewalk on one side of the road, for sure, all the way from the development here all the way out to South Washington. So those are all commitments that the city has made.
Okay.
Now there's not a whole lot we can do. I mean, the right of way there, it's only a half width right of way. So believe it or not, there's only a 36-foot right of way there.
Okay.
But we think that we can make the improvements to the road, perhaps widen it out a little bit. We still want to keep the character of the road being a kind of a, definitely a local street, but perhaps it can be widened out a little bit, but then putting in sidewalk would be good. I know our city engineer, as a part of the development evaluation, wants to have them do kind of a traffic study. So there might be some improvements too, depending on how that traffic study comes back, right at the intersection of 36th Street and South Washington.
Yeah.
That likely would be, kind of improvements that would be the city's nickel to have to take care of, but we can easily see we probably would need to have like a dedicated left turn out of there and right turn. So that would probably need to be widened out a little bit. We're not looking at all of having any kind of a signalization at that intersection, but certainly I think it would have to be improved a little bit and get some sight corner, vision things taken care of a little bit. So
yeah, I definitely think that much traffic is going to change the character of that road.
Yeah. So I know the development team, they didn't note it, and perhaps they will, but there is a secondary kind of emergency access.
I saw that.
That's to be provided kind of in the southeast part of the development there. So I don't know, Gail or Steve or Don, if that was meant to be. Okay, I do see there you're looking to have a gate. So that probably would be truly just kind of an emergency access. So emergency responders can get through there if it's a breakaway gate or whatever it needs to be. So yeah, I mean, the traffic coming to and from this project will go on 36th Street.
Yeah.
I'm sure the neighbors there probably are not going to like to hear that. That will have to be something that's, part of the whole evaluation of the project.
Hey, Mark.
Yes.
Why would you redo 36th Street post-construction?
There's going to be a lot of cement trucks, construction trucks that are going to beat the road up. So We really, don't want to put a whole lot of money into it and then have it get all beat up. Might as well wait for the construction to occur and then go in and pretty it up after the development.
Okay. I was just thinking, as you get people inhabiting that area, you're going to have a lot of backup. That's all.
Yeah. So I mean,
that makes sense too.
There would be nothing stopping, if the development moves forward, of the city being more proactive with putting in the sidewalk. We can certainly do that, but I think any kind of resurfacing or potentially even reconstruction of the actual 36th Street, we would want to wait till the development's done or pretty much almost done.
Is there any other way to get traffic in and out of the development?
No.
No.
No. It's
That's
bound
the
by
challenge,
houses.
I think, of the whole project, is that it's just going to be one road in, one road out. And so it's going to call on the patience of a lot of people who live there to deal with that situation. I think that's going to be the difficult part, I believe.
That's always been my biggest concern with this, even when it was just half of this project, was that it's just one way in, one way out on 36. Because it is, if I'm looking at the plan correctly here, it's the paved portion is 20 feet wide right now. We got only 33 feet of right of way, and as you get even closer out to South Washington, the Moose construction and pool place is almost right up against the road. So there's not a lot of room one way or the other. I know that, Mark, am I remember correctly that there was some sort of traffic study done or some numbers that were done where they said that 36th Street could handle the 20 or so units that they were looking at before. I can't remember. I know that there was something done with traffic there. I just can't remember exactly what it was. But when the number doubled and I saw this, I thought, I'm not sure that road's capable of handling that much traffic.
Yeah. So I mean, so that's kind of why Brian White really would like to get a traffic study completed. The main limiting factor is going to be the peak hours, in the mornings when everybody's looking to go to work. At nighttime, that's quite a bit more dispersed at nighttime. But I think we'll be really interested in seeing what those peak morning hour counts are going to be, and then see once, if there's any way that can be mitigated by some street improvements there.
Is there a long-term plan? I know that we just redid Washington, but in the future, when it needs to be redone again, is there a plan to do more of a boulevard type thing, like on 16th Street in front of Meyer?
It's been
Not
discussed.
that I'm aware of.
It's been discussed, but it's not in our 6-year transportation plan. But it has been discussed before. Though I would say it's definitely well out of the 6-year.
Oh, for sure.
And then quick question, Mark. And you keep saying that you're going to do the improvements on 36 after the project. And just to be clear, you are talking about after phase 1 and phase 2 is completed, correct?
Yeah, that's kind of our initial thinking. Yes.
Though having said that, we'll see, how torn up the road is. I mean, there's obviously wiggle room in that. But it would make the most sense to wait until the end.
Can you get the construction vehicles in and out in that other access point?
Like a construction road itself, through that other access. Yeah, it's going to be very difficult for people living there to put up with that construction traffic.
Yeah. And then once they finish it, then they got to wait for the road traffic.
Yeah.
But you're talking about doing the traffic study and the engineering study before the construction starts. I wouldn't want to get this thing built and then realize that 36th Street is not capable of handling the traffic.
Yeah, that would be a requirement, actually, that will be submitted to you for your planning commission review.
Yes.
And Brian's assessment on that again will be provided. I do recall what you're talking about, Nathan. He did do an assessment earlier and had a certain amount of units that would be fine on that road for standards. So we'll get that from him again as well.
What business is that secondary access point going through?
I can tell you because I got it pulled up on Google Maps. It's
Okay.
Lakeshore Health. It's a medical park. So
Oh,
it's Holland
yes.
Pediatric Associates, Lakeshore Health Partners. It's just immediately north of Village Inn.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Do one of the applicants want to talk about how they'll have a easement with that property?
So we're basically setting it up again for emergency access at that lower, that lower entrance there. So there will be a gate, as Mark said, maybe a knockdown gate or something with a block box. So it would be a paved road coming in. We'd have to maintain it, but then it would be accessible by emergency vehicles.
You have an easement agreement with the property, correct? Which will be required by the fire department before approval.
Yes. And that easement and that discussion has already taken place with the property owner.
Does anyone know whether or not that fire access road could be used to bring in equipment, construction equipment?
I would be very surprised, Jenna, if we could, because this is just a light duty. I keep pointing at it with my pointer. I apologize. That's just a light duty parking lot there. So if the property owner was in agreement to make that a construction road, it would have to all be redone after construction's complete, which would start to make this project cost prohibitive for us.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So Don or Gail or Steve, can you perhaps share with the Planning Commission a little bit your plans for reaching out to the neighborhood with workshop stuff or an online presence, somehow to get input and to get the thoughts and impressions of the neighborhood, because that's a critical piece. The Planning Commission is going to want to know what the neighborhood thinks about this. So if you can talk to that.
You want to take that one, Steve? Or Don?
Sure. Yeah. So we have a website that we set up for the neighbors to give feedback on. Given the fact that we're not doing face-to-face meetings, we thought that would be a next best thing. Also provided a phone number for them to call if for some reason they don't have computer access. They were mailed a postcard that went out in the mail yesterday afternoon and this morning that gives them the web address and explains the project a little bit, explains that instead of Darby developing the project and us doing a separate project, that we've combined it into one, and that which will be a surprise to them. All along we were just talking about the northern half, and when Mr. Darby approached us about us developing as opposed to them, we looked at it and said, yeah, that makes some sense. So yeah, the feedback loop will be they'll be able to give us feedback on the website, and we'll certainly take a look at that, incorporate what we can. We've already incorporated some things. For example, the original RFP didn't require us to have much of a buffer on the northern part of the city-owned property, and we heard from folks in the condos that they really wanted a larger buffer, and so we've added that. And we'll certainly listen to and incorporate what we can going forward.
Steve, can you share that website with us?
Yeah, give me a second. Unless, Don, you have it really handy.
I need a second also, but I think it's just 36th Street development.
Yes, here it is. www.holland36streetproject.com.
And 36 is just the number 36.
Yes, yes. Not sure if it's live yet. I'm checking right now. Yep, it's live. So, yep.
Great.
I'm sure it'll be in our minutes.
So just as a FYI to Planning Commission, we're telling them that they can, keep that up and running really until, even just a couple of days before the Planning Commission meeting, at which point they'll give me a summary that I can then include in your packet. So hopefully, in the next couple of weeks, they'll be able to obtain good feedback, but also be able to incorporate that feedback into their plan.
I guess in summary, as I think more about the project, I think that it's going to be pretty important that the city, I see the city as a partner in this project. It was formerly city-owned land, and city owns 36th Street. I think the city is going to have to be a little more proactive in making sure that the residents along 36th Street are taken care of in this process, because I think it's going to be quite difficult for them during the whole construction phase and after that as well. And it's going to be dirty. The air is going to be really bad. And I think there's a good chance that you'll probably hear a lot of complaints from people that are living along that road, the way that it's being set up right now. That's just my own thought about it.
I'd like to jump in with a comment too. I think it'd be helpful to see some elevations of the back sides of the buildings. We have those tiny homes on 16th and Central with the back sides facing Central, and I know some members of Planning Commission don't love the look of the backside of the buildings to the road. So if you could show some thought to that and what that's going to look like, I think that'd be helpful.
Yeah, and that's actually a requirement also. That's a good point, but it's a requirement for site plan is to show all elevations of all sides of buildings. I have a quick question, and then we do need to get going. The sidewalk that goes around the property, I recall previously you had mentioned that would be open to the public. Is that still something that you're considering, even though it'll be a private road?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, anything else? Any other feedback?
I wasn't aware that this is a private road. Is that ring road going to be a private road, privately owned by the development?
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
That's the plan.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. Applicants,
you.
do you have any last questions or concerns?
Looks good.
No, I appreciate you guys working so hard on this, because I know that it increases the housing market in Holland, and it increases the affordability market in Holland as well.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you, Gail, Don, Steve, Gail, and Todd. If you have any additional questions, definitely reach out to Mark and myself, and we'll figure those out as we go forward.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Take care.
All righty, it's 5:30.
We've been on schedule all night.
Yeah, I was going to say, Brooke, you run a tight ship. Boy, I'm impressed.
I haven't had to do much. You guys are being quiet.
We're stunned by this environment.
I know. Jenna, do you feel good about this?
Oh, I do. very productive. Wow.
So nice. So do we have more people from the public coming on, Mallory?
Yes, so most have joined already.
Do we need to give them a couple minutes?
Got Becky Page joining. I know she's with one of the applicants, so I'll have her come on. But otherwise, the waiting room is empty. So.
Okay. Well, wonderful. You said she's coming on yet?
Yeah, it looks like she's
Okay.
just joined.
Let us know.
Okay, you can start. She's with 317 Central. She's the engineer.
Okay. All right, let's get started. Call to order our meeting over Zoom on Tuesday, May 12, 2020. I need to have approval of the minutes for the March 10, 2020 meeting.
So moved.
Need a support? Oh, Andy supported. All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Communications from the audience for items that are not on the agenda can speak if you unmute yourself.
Yes,
Yeah.
this is Rosemary Stevenson. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yeah, I want to comment on the 36th Street thing.
Sure.
I was reading the document, the PDF that was on your site regarding this. And I noticed in the last paragraph of one of the pages, I don't remember which one, they said there was a comment that with respect to drainage, that the developers planned to take care of this. And I mean, it was very flippant the way I read it. It appears it really hasn't been thought through, and it's to us in Pioneer Village the number one thing. I don't know. I mean, I was stunned.
Rosemary,
Yeah.
What is your address?
Yeah. 813 Millbridge.
Okay, thank you.
I'm in Pioneer Village.
Okay, wonderful.
Yeah, it seems that I was kind of stunned earlier when the question of parking came up, and it seems that they hadn't really even thought that through. And it really, really concerns me because, you know, this underground root system that they're going to tear up is something you can't see. It's the last thing most people think about, even though it should be the first. And if they haven't even thought about parking, oh my God, I mean, all I can think of is we're going to be flooded out at some point. And who is going to bear the liability of that? That should, if this is authorized to go forward and it's not done properly, then we, Pioneer Village, needs to be held harmless on damages. The city should be liable for that. So that's basically what I have to say today.
Thank you, Rosemary. And Jenna, you can talk to that.
Sure, Rosemary, thank you for your comments. We appreciate them very much. What I wanted to just say is that in addition to receiving site plan approval, the applicant also needs to go through an approval process to get a stormwater permit. That stormwater permit is based on meeting a bunch of standards, a bunch of regulations that have been put out by the state for stormwater policies and legislation. So it's definitely not being glossed over. It's just being glossed over just in our process because planning commissioners don't have, in our realm, in our planning realm, we don't have the ability to approve. The planning commissioners don't have the ability to approve or deny a project based on stormwater issues. That would, again, be what it will do, though, is they need to get a stormwater permit in order for them to even get a building permit. In addition to them needing to get a site plan approval from Planning Commission to get a building permit as well.
Okay, what is the time frame on that? I mean, is that like the first thing that's done, or?
So that it happens in conjunction with the site plan approval. And again, they cannot go forward and get a building permit until that stormwater permit is obtained.
Well, and just to be clear, they were presenting during our study session, which means they haven't even submitted their application yet, correct, Jenna?
That's correct.
So this is a very generalized plan that they've given us just to get more feedback on, and then they're going to get more public comment, correct?
That's correct.
And then
But the
submit their
stormwater,
plan.
yeah, but the stormwater element is actually not in your purview anymore. So that's just outside of what planning commission can look at. But I want to assure her and the other residents that a very rigorous review will occur of the stormwater, just focusing on the stormwater to make sure that everything is aligned with state standards.
Thanks, Jenna.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the comment. One other thing, while you got me on here, is the jumping from 19 to 46 units overnight was quite stunning.
42.
And 40, because they were debating 36, 46. But regardless, so you've got, right now, you've got 10 houses on 36th Street. And if to use your number of 42, so it would go from 10 to 52 or 56, depending on which number you're talking about. You're talking about a 500% increase on 36th Street.
Yeah.
That's stunning. That's stunning. It's like overnight, really. That's why I feel I'm really frustrated, because it feels like this is just getting like way out of hand. It's like a locomotive that's lost its brakes. That's all I'll say right now. I mean, there's a lot of things like that happened on this meeting today that were just like, whoa, who's checking this stuff? It's like this huge rabbit hole.
Well, and it's not an approved thing yet. And I know that Jenna and Mark will be working closely with the developers on all of this. So if you do have more concerns though, Rosemary, do not hesitate to call Mark or Jenna. Correct, Jenna?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay,
thank you. All right. Anyone else from the audience that needs to speak on anything that is not on the agenda? All right. Moving on to unfinished business. And that would be 317 Central Avenue, Administrative Infill Review Appeal. And is this on the table?
I believe it was on the table from your March 10th meeting.
So
it got
we need
tabled
to
for a month, and then we didn't meet in April, so.
Right, so we need to remove it from the table, correct?
Yes.
Okay, I need a motion to remove it from the table.
Since I motioned to put it on the table, I can motion to take it off.
And I think I seconded his motion last time, so I'll second it this time.
Wonderful, all those in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so moving on, Jenna?
I'm actually going to turn this one over to Mark.
Oh, Mark.
Very good. So you have in front of you tonight is an appeal of a staff administrative infill approval that was issued back in the beginning of February. Okay. So the Planning Commission did have some discussion in regards to this during your March 10th meeting. So we did have some discussion about this process at that time. So I'm not going to belabor it and go all over that. I think suffice it to say, the Planning Commission has been supplied with a lot of information. I have a long staff report that's shared with you that kind of documents the time frame and everything in here. discusses how the Planning Commission also reviewed and approved a site plan for this site also, and the Planning Commission approved that back, I believe, in your February meeting. So you have done that also, and that site plan was approved with the setbacks and all the other typical elements that go with the site plan. So like I say, we do have in your packet copies of the appellants. Let's just call them the Hooksmas, and their original appeal. They have a subsequent clarification letter that spells out their rationale for why they appealed. I believe I also included in your information just a recent letter that they sent to staff's attention, so you should have that also. Some additional information. I know the applicant provided a letter, I believe it was back in April, that has been forwarded for your information also. So you have a lot of information here, folks, but I'm going to submit to you that I really think what's in front of you tonight is really rather a kind of a simple question, okay? When it boils down to it, you really just got a simple question to answer, and that is dealing with the appeal, okay? Some things that you can do, I mean, quite simply is, you know, you could vote to affirm the staff approval of this, or you could simply move to amend the staff infill review and come up with some other ideas that you want to add onto the infill approval, okay? Kind of dissecting and looking at the appellants kind of issues that were of concern to them, or really kind of just dwelled on the setback issue. They did not have any things that they talked about of the massing of the buildings, the architecture of the buildings, didn't have anything dealing with windows treatment or anything of that nature. It really was just kind of focused in on the setback requirements, okay, or the approved setbacks. Staff will basically going to tell you, I mean, you know where I'm coming from. I think that the setbacks are where they should be for a C1 zoned property in a mixed use building. I believe the Planning Commission, some of you may even agree with that also. I mean, you approved that with the site plan approval back in February too. So really it's kind of in your ballpark right now where you want to go with this. So you're looking at an appeal again, and should you want to kind of modify the staff approval, you certainly can do that. I would caution you and have you state things, some factual things in the record though. If you do want to change some things, I don't think it's proper that you would just say, well, we're just going to change this, and it's just, you know, now this is just the new approve or the new requirement, whatever it may be. You need to have some solid rationale for that. So
thanks, Mark.
I'm going to stop with that. If you have any questions at all.
We do have a public hearing for this, correct?
There is no public hearing required for this.
Okay.
You did take a public comment, I believe, at your March study session. So I suppose
you put an asterisk next to it, so I just assumed it was a public hearing.
Yeah, so you could elect to take a public comment if you want to. You certainly do not need to. I don't think that there's anything materially has changed at all. So, but that's
Sounds
a
good.
discussion, Brooke.
Okay. I will choose to not do a public hearing at this time. We did have a lot of public comment before. So if anybody has any questions or anything, Dave?
Sure, Brooke. Having been around for, I don't know, the 30 years when we developed the infill ordinance, and I don't agree with staff, the denial of the infill requirement, because the infill was written so that the neighborhood would not be so drastically changed. And so I would affirm the letter, oh, let's see, who wrote this? Anyway, the neighbor's opinion that in fact the infill was written to maintain the neighborhood character. And this design does not do that. I've spoken with a couple of the neighbors, and they would be willing, if in fact they would have slided back in both directions a bit. I know they've asked for 10 feet in both directions, and anywhere between 6, 8, or 10 would probably at least appease the neighborhood.
Thanks,
Let
Dave.
me, if I can quick jump in there too. So the C1 district does have setbacks here, minimum setback of 0 feet, maximum setback of 10 feet. So if commissioners did want to modify the infill review, and if you find the rationale to do that, you could change the infill to have the building setback further. But it cannot be more than 10 feet setback, because that is the maximum for a commercial mixed-use building in the C1 district.
Okay, Mark, can you put the plan on the shared screen? Or no?
That's Mallory to do that.
Oh, okay. Mallory.
Actually, Jenna will do it.
Actually, me.
Oh, okay. Let's work together, right?
Teamwork.
Yes. Anyone else with any questions or comments from the Planning Commission?
Yes, I have some comments.
Mm-hmm.
Just as a reminder to the commissioners, I think Mark has already done this, so that we have already approved the site plan, and we have already approved the setback that the applicant has requested. It seems to me that what we are doing tonight is we are looking at the appeal of the infill provision, and that's basically all we're doing. And if we agree with the appeal, then we can go back and make a change. If we don't agree with the appeal, then things will just remain as they are. In reading over the applicants or the appellants' letters that they have written in, it seems like one of the most important things that they're asking about is whether this is a commercial property or whether it's a residential property. They argue that it's not a commercial property because the large amount of square footage is residential, and therefore it should have been designated a residential property and not a commercial property. If that is the case, then the residential requirements for this project change they're different. The residential requirements are different than the commercial requirements for the setbacks and so forth. So it would be a starting point if we were to agree with the appellant that this is a residential property. And so I wanted to ask Mark. Mark is the one, or the city staff made that determination when they looked at this. They determined that it was a commercial building, and everything flowed from that determination. So I think it would be appropriate for Mark to review the decisions that they made in designating this a commercial building, because if it is a commercial building, then what the applicant has asked for is all appropriate, and we have approved it. To me, that's how it flows. And so I don't know if the other commissioners agree with me or not, but I think that we could hear from staff why they determined that this was a commercial building.
Go ahead, Mark.
Okay. Well, there's, it's a mixed use building, okay, but per kind of building code, it's treated as a commercial building, okay? So, but being a mixed use building, I mean, we're just looking at the C1 code. Mixed use buildings are allowed. It's commercial in nature, okay? The C1 district does allow for one, the terminology is an accessory building, okay? So the appellants kind of read into that and go, well, it's not really accessory. There's more square footage for the residential aspect than the commercial aspect. So therefore it's not accessory, but that zoning language really is meant to say, listen, you got a commercial building. It has to have the orientation and the setbacks and so forth that are afforded a commercial building. You're allowed to have one dwelling unit in the building upstairs, and that's kind of an accessory kind of dwelling unit, okay? That residential component then does not need to meet the residential requirements of the zoning ordinance, and I think I spoke to that in the staff report. So it really is, it's a commercial building. It's just no doubt about it. It's a commercial building. Talking about, let's just kind of talk about downtown for a moment too. There's plenty of commercial buildings downtown, and GDK is building new buildings or has built them on West 8th Street, okay? The commercial parts of those buildings, even though they're 4 stories tall, the commercial aspect is just the ground floor. The upper 2, 3, or 4 floors of all those buildings are all residential, okay? So, but we treat that as being a commercial building, and it has to abide by the commercial requirements.
Thanks, Mark. Any other commission members?
I just wanted to conclude then, having heard what Mark just said. I think that if we agree that this is a commercial building, then what the applicant has requested is consistent with our zoning code. And as we always like to say, we get what we zone for. And therefore, I think that our decision at the last meeting was correct. And so that's Marvin Martin's, we get what we zone for.
Lynn?
Yeah, so my question is, I'm sorry, Fred, were you done?
Yes.
Yeah. So my question actually gets to the infill requirements in themselves and the applicability. So when I look at, I guess I'm the question that keeps rolling around in my mind is how you determined, Mark, that the C1 guidance trumps the infill. Why does it override it? Because what I see here in the applicability section for infill, it says any lot within a C1 neighborhood commercial zone district, which is proposed to be used for the construction or placement of, of a new or relocated residential structure, is applicable to the infill requirements. So that I read that in that section, and then you're saying that the C1 guidance overrides that.
So if somebody came in and they wanted to have just a purely residential building in the C1 district, that clearly would need to abide by the residential infill requirements then, okay? And I think the code states that, the C1 district code states that setbacks and everything else have to abide by the R2 district, which is a little bit of a disconnect because you're right in the middle of the TRN area. But at any rate, that's the tie-in to requiring that it would then have to meet all the residential infill requirements, okay? So we made the interpretation then that even if it comes in as a commercial building, okay, we still want to, it's a new building, we still want to do a review to look at some issues here, but clearly it's a commercial building, and it doesn't have to be meet the residential requirements and the residential standards, okay?
Well, it does say, it says to regulate the moving of any building necessary in this area of subsection B2 below, to regulate the placement, presentation, and character of any new non-residential building. And then it gives us the areas where those infill requirements would apply. And you did say that you made the interpretation, so I'm just wondering if it's in maybe all of this is sort of open to interpretation, but I'm just wondering about that.
Okay, so it's subject to the infill review, but you have to do the infill review within the confines of the zone district that you have. So that's really kind of the stance that we have. So it's a commercial building, zone C1. Yes, we can do an infill on it. We did do the infill. You know, the applicant did change some things, you know, because of the infill requirement. But at the end of the day, you have to live within the confines of the C1 zone district. So that's kind of where I was saying, you know, the infill review, as it would pertain to residentially zoned property and all the adjoining properties that are zoned TRN, that would not apply to this property then, because this is zone C1.
Yeah, I'll jump in here. So I think Mark is right on that. It has to fit within the zoning requirements of the C1. So it needs to be within 10 feet. But what infill review could have done is required it 5 to 10 or 8 to 10 feet. And that's not a decision that was made here. And that's really the question here of when looking at the infill review standards, there's point number one, there's placement. Does placement apply? And do the adjacent properties with further setbacks, do they influence this to saying this property should be set back too? Or are we saying, no, it's C1, those things don't apply?
Any other discussion?
So Andrew, could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so for the infill review standards, when Mark was going through this, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, he could have required the building to, you know, still stay within C1 zoning regulations, has to be within 10 feet, but he could have said, you guys got to keep 5 feet off to meet infill review. And that would still comply with all the zoning regulations and then meet infill review as well. He didn't do that here. And that's what we're deciding here. I think for us to overrule Mark, there has to be like substantial overwhelming evidence to go back on that. And I think this was a judgment call of staff that we should not have questioned in our earlier meetings because it wasn't appealed yet. Now that it has been appealed, we can question it. But if we are to go back on it, I think there needs to be solid evidence, not just a judgment call. I think maybe my judgment call would have been different, but we have to look at the words here.
We also have to consider the fact that there are neighbors that are concerned, and we also, part of our job also is to consider their concerns as well. And if it's still within the guidelines of the C1 and the infill, that we can do that as well.
For sure, definitely.
I think that my concern here is we kind of, the last time we did approve the site plan in February, we did hesitate quite a bit, and we had a lot of discussion and concern about the safety of cars pulling up to that intersection at is that 13th there and Central Avenue. And the sight line with the building being, currently it's only 2 feet off the sidewalk, right, Mark?
You know, if we can zoom in on that corner there a little bit. So the corner is actually set back. I think it's about 8 foot setback. You can see there's an indentation there.
Oh, the door. Okay.
There's a dashed line. So on the ground floor, it's actually set back. I want to say it's like 8 feet from the sidewalk line on 13th.
7. It looks like the door is 5 feet, and then the setback of the building is 2.
Yeah. So the upper floors, the second floor will go all the way out to the corner, well, where the dashed line is. And
okay, there's an overhang there.
But I think that there's going to be plenty of clear space there for pedestrians walking around the corner, or somebody on a bicycle riding through there. they're going to be able to see pedestrians and be able to react. I don't, professionally as a planner, I don't see any issue whatsoever with clear visions for vehicles around this corner. There's plenty of opportunity for people to see where they're going there.
This is Jennifer. I just want to say I concur with Andrew and staff. I think the last meeting, this is my second one, we wanted to just get some feedback more from the testimony we heard. And so I feel like the feedback, staff has done a great job of answering it. And if we do spot setbacks, we're setting ourselves up for litigation, legal issues, and I'm comfortable with staff's recommendation.
Anyone else?
Yeah, well, I'm definitely comfortable with the staff recommendation also. I think part of this is that we have taken public input. We had a public hearing. We reviewed the site plan. We looked at what the applicant was asking for, and we finally approved the whole thing, including the setbacks. And I just don't see any reason, unless we agree with the appellant that there was something wrong with the infill determination. That's the only way that we could back up on it. And I'm in favor of the interpretation and the infill analysis that the staff did. That's my own personal opinion. So I think we're free to confirm them, to affirm what the staff did, and keep going.
Thanks, Fred.
I would kind of agree. I think it is zoned for a commercial lot. It is a commercial building. It doesn't have to have a certain dimension or proportion. Just to Mark's comment earlier, to be able to look at 8th Street at some of the GDK, having 4 flights of residential and just that first floor. This one is just, one on top and not multiple buildings, but we still treated all those with the same C1 standard. So I think for this one, auxiliary is that it is zoned and it is filling all the correct setbacks and things according to the C1. So I think that's kind of where my vote would go.
Well, and I think that it is comparing it to 8th Street is problematic because it's a different neighborhood, and it seems like this could have been interpreted a different way, and this is the reason for the appeal. I think, regardless of whether or not we approve the site plan, the reason we have an appeal is so we can go back and look at it and make a decision one way or the other. And it seems like, based on what I'm reading here, it could have been interpreted that this lot should also apply, all of the infill requirements should be applicable, including the setbacks.
Yeah, I would agree with Lynn, but I would also, since the beginning, I've never argued that it's not a mixed-use commercial building. It just doesn't meet the aesthetics of the neighborhood, and it can do both.
There's a phrase that's used a lot in the law, and that is that hard cases make bad law. That I see exactly where the appellants are on this, but the way I'm interpreting this, that staff came down rightly within the bounds of their discretion on this, and doing it's clear to me. It's a commercial building. It's in a C1 district. That it does meet all of the requirements that are there, and I think the better parallel examples are, what is it, 15th and Columbia, the Minute Mart 2, or even down the block at Central and 16th Street. That you start looking at some of those commercial buildings that are sitting right next to residential neighborhoods. These neighborhoods were zoned this way for a particular reason. And to go back to what Fred said, that we heard Marvin say many times, you get what you zone for. This is a lot that's zoned C1. And the only setback that's varying on this is actually from where it was before is the 13th Street setback. Because what used to be my favorite place to get calzones when I was in college sits right, the old Great Lakes Pizza sits right up to the sidewalk and always has. So I'm inclined to follow staff's recommendation on this.
Any other comments or questions? Or we can move into a motion, correct?
Yep.
Yes.
I move that we affirm the CNS staff administration approval of infill compatibility.
Support.
All right. Mallory, can we actually do a roll call for this one?
Yes, we can. All right. Lozano,
Yes.
Raymond,
No.
Box,
Yes.
Blunt,
Yes.
DeBlock,
No.
Kenyon,
Yes.
Owens,
Yes.
Van Antwerp,
Yes.
and Anderson.
Yes.
All right, vote passes.
All right. Did we have the applicant on here?
Yes, they are, I believe Matt Nykruk and Becky Page representing.
Oh, okay.
They're on.
All right. Is there any other?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. Anything else we need to do with that, Mark?
No, no. Good.
So that will move on, correct?
Yes.
All right. New business. I don't have anything on my agenda here. And communications and petitions, scheduling of any public hearings.
We don't have.
Sounds like you're gonna have 2 of them for the next meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
But we shouldn't necessarily schedule them at this moment. We don't know 100%.
Okay. Communications from commission members? No? How did this meeting go? Anybody have any input on the Zoom?
I think it went well. We stayed on schedule.
I know.
Oh, I liked it.
Really well done. Mallory organized us really well, and
Mhm.
really, I think it went great.
Yeah.
It's definitely nice to see everybody.
Yeah.
All right. And the flow went good. Just want to get some feedback for next time. Okay. Communications from staff. Looks like Lake Town Township Master Plan. And Mark, you have something to say?
I do. I think I'll be very brief because I know we are right at the end of our time, but just want to bring to your attention that the Lake Town Township is in the process of updating their master plan. They released it for public comment in mid-February. They allowed 63 days, I believe, for public comment. So those days have expired, but we still thought it was worth bringing it to your attention just so you knew that this draft existed. They have not acted on it yet, so I would think that if anybody felt strongly enough about something in the plan that they wanted to bring to the Lake Town Township Planning Commission's attention, that I would hope that they would take a look at it. I don't think there's any surprises in the draft. The last 2 pages of the packet is just a 2-page summary. Rather than try to summarize the entire draft, I just chose to summarize those items that I thought would be of the greatest interest to this group. So just I highlighted what came out of the public meetings that were held. One of the 3 public, and these were held in July of 2018. But one of the meetings focused on the northern Lake Town region. And I just noted some of the summary comments from that public meeting. A lot of emphasis, as you can see, on just preservation of the rural character, protection of farmland, and emphasis on continuing, they've done quite a bit of pedestrian connectivity in that area, and I think they just want to continue that. And then the only other chapter I chose to summarize or provide excerpts of was the residential use section. So yeah, similarly there, I think just it's kind of a status quo sort of a plan that says let's keep doing the same, protecting the rural character, being very careful about any further residential development. There's some goals on the second page. Again, yeah, just being careful about the concentration of density. Another point about pedestrian pathways, preserving woodlands and wetlands. There was an interest in the strategy section toward the very bottom of the page. There was an interesting, maybe potential strategy to develop a residential zoning district that would be somewhat between what for them is R1, which they call rural estate zoning district, and R2, which is low density. So it seems like in that area, kind of bordering the city, they see a need for something somewhat in between those two, but they don't define what that would look like. They also look at the potential for a zoning overlay district that would allow some commercial development, which currently does not exist in that northwest corner of the township, kind of abutting the Park Township area. So again, they don't say a whole lot about what that would look like, but that's just a potential strategy that they're considering. And
Thanks.
that's it.
Thanks, Mark. And then Holland Township has something similar coming out, don't they? I think they're working on something, so it'd be good to get a review of that one too.
And Park Township is also requesting any kind of supportive documentation that would help them. I think they're in the process of drafting as well.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and they have a microsite out now where you can provide input, so you absolutely can do so. I'll send you that link, but it's www.hollandtownshipplan.com. But I will send you the link as well.
Thanks, Jenna.
Sure. I also have just a couple of things. I wanted to just let you know about some admin reviews that were just approved. One is a small one for the Holland Board of Public Works, just garages in their area in the back to keep supplies. So that was approved. And LG Chem, they have yet another parking lot. They come in, every couple months with a new parking lot expansion. So that was just approved today as well with conditions. And just as a note, all of these are always sent to the chair of the Planning Commission to keep them on your behalf. And of course, if you have any questions about them, of course, you can always ask staff as well. I also had a meeting earlier with the Ottawa County Planning Department. We get together every 4 months or so. And so we had another Zoom meeting. And I just thought that maybe you'd be interested in just some of what the county's doing. Just really quickly, some projects that they have going on that are planning related. They're looking at modeling, what happens with development with rising waters, and how that can be incorporated into legislation and ordinances. Grand Haven, the city of Grand Haven has quite a good ordinance on that in terms of sensitive area overlays. So that's something that they've been working on. They have also been looking at broadband gaps, especially now with such the reliance on internet sources and ability. So they're about to do a large study and looking at the vulnerable populations that do not have broadband countywide to see where that may exist and model that. They're also looking at water conscious landscaping. So they have staff that's going through all of our different landscaping ordinances countywide on a municipal level and looking at comparing them to best practices and kind of giving us some input. So I have sent our proposed landscaping and green infrastructure ordinance to them for that review. So that'll be interesting to get their input on that as well. They also have formed a housing commission that goes out of that department. And they're working right now with Ryan Kilpatrick on getting vouchers for projects. So trying to become a public housing authority so that they can obtain vouchers even though they don't actually want to own affordable housing projects. So just thought I'd give you a little bit of a rundown since that just happened. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jenna. Anyone else? All right. Motion for adjournment.
Come on, Dave.
You're muted, Dave. You're muted.
I mean, I have to unmute so I can motion to
Yes.
adjourn?
Yes.
Support.
All those in favor signify by waving goodbye.
Bye.
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 Thanks, everybody.
Everybody.